There we go. All right, thanks. I'm going to call this meeting of the Elliott Board of Directors to order. And I'd like to welcome everybody here, especially our public visitors, to speak about public comment and shortly. And to begin, take a roll call and confirm that we do have a quorum. Somebody doing that for us, Paul? I think we do. Are we missing any board members? I think. All right, good enough. That's good. We do. All right. Item C then is the approval of previous board minutes. But questions or concerns about minutes from our previous meeting? Are we done? Motion. I'm jumping previous board minutes. Second. Here we have a motion to approve the second for this our previous meeting. For the question, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Go. DSL, Amy, I think you're up with your current. Wait a minute. Approval of minutes. Before we get to the Elliott State Research Force staff updates, I'd like to recognize the following. Yesterday, if you were around, was a big day for the Shark Creek here and the Elliott State Research Force as well, and a big day for Director Walker. She enjoyed, in fact, greatly enjoyed her last board meeting. I think it was A, because it was the last board meeting, and B, because it was her last one. And Vicky, we are again spoken of last incredibly glad. So thank you very much. And Jeff. Okay. Okay. Where's oh, what did you because for y'all and I think that because you couldn't make conclusion, it was all three and just work. Remember talking about the problem. We just look and make decisions and it's so I we all not my life's going to be Michael Barrow. And so fine. Exciting. So, but where we come so far. More so right well and I've done and yeah and or build there was concern that we would get that far. Do our contracts without going services. Yeah. Our these It's oh, was oh, and I think I like well, you know, things, but someday so that I see Sam. Uh, this um, like has and but this is like thank you for your safe promise to put on our hands on for the team clear funds. This promise from this group and for this promise yet for many years. I first and we so Jeff will be like your business. I seven, which um, you have not no I come is you work out now here. All right. So okay. Yeah. No, so into yeah. You're correct. We'll be sure. Oh, it's public comment. You wish these consistent. I think the answers are driving or in check here. Okay. Um, well, water, power, any other, we will then you will get the active both when life you know very research. Well, only because we're both like well, third, we water without on students with that and addiction to yeah. Yeah. We're back. No. Okay. Morning. Roll. Personal certification. We will see you guys. We had a meeting yesterday. Director the fund from the government be here this morning. Especially a little bit. No. For your maybe being watching
safe. Otherwise, not.
I'm glad Jeff is joining us now.
Good morning. This is just yeah. Together. We extend do fight figuring thing. Getting all of the foundations place and be up here sitting at the table with an agenda and how that you're going to move forward together. It's really pretty special. For watching all this way. Thank you for everyone for really your huge to spend on it. I I never want to be last meeting. I don't want to repeat. I do want to pull that. We for a given verse decided this board, and it's still it was a long. It was very long street to go and back out and said, but there's help, but both if not taken with a lot of and so brief money into discuss but all of this and we that was the key to forward progress for the community see that is thrives to be like so, I the government to the both management plan is and both and try I work to give this work to work continue of the spiritual response of what is what and mainly the available me might about or first the this board I that
Yeah. I really the comments from
I absolutely will and I think it's the way we're just in the moment we're things that were not experience of putting the last word vision of doctrine. It really is the last word is here. They don't and incremental decisions. We don't we do want to got right of things and I think that is actually how we put the whole management plan process for approval, but we still have done and is that very the element retained from the landing from perspective that is direction we responded in the position for helping third business in a way that it does work. We felt a whole bunch of program different on the that have always at the station. But these elect to say here's a market still until we want to have the conversation more. That's hard. There's a reason to have provided by the board visions on that's and you can see at least so use there what's the then available to the director there then conversation. And on work. Which so that fix this process and work. Process.
Cease our momentary recess, and the sound quality is better. Our IT guys have done their magical work, and we're now back online, and folks can hear us. So before Jeff gets to get out of here, Peter, you had your hand raised, and you have a question, and we are recording again.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Peter, you have a question for Jeff.
Is green light on or off? On.
On.
On. Okay. So first, thank you, Jeff, that you played a key role wearing at least 3 different hats in this birth process, and also having you involved. You have deep experience in how public boards deal with gnarly forest issues in Oregon. So thank you for all you've done. And I'm going to repeat a question that we talked about last night, which is, and it's an open question that I think we welcome the answers at any point, but what thoughts do you have about how this board could be most useful to the land board? And turning it back around, what in your view does the land board most need and want from the Elliott board? How do we work as well together as possible?
It's a great question.
Yeah. Stable, consistent progress that is exercising all the discretion that is available under the forest management plan and the HCP, with the ultimate goal that this forest needs to be a dynamic research forest that is financially self-sufficient and really open to and honoring the different, it's pretty diverse group of interests that spend a lot of time and will continue to spend a lot of time with you and on this board on the multiple dimensions that the forest is supposed to represent. So we're going to have intensive management of portions of the forest. We're going to have ecological forestry demonstrations. We're going to have a carbon demonstration project on the forest. We're going to have multiple sources of revenue. They all have to be balanced, but not losing sight and really pushing staff to find partnerships on research with multiple entities that can contribute and really start publishing, right? I mean, wouldn't it be? It'll be a great day when we see in the Journal of Science an article that is, the relationship of active management on the on Miralette and fringe, fringe areas next to harvest or something like that, or active management in riparian areas as opposed to stream buffers that Gordy Reeves is talking to you about, or the monitoring and implementation of carbon sequestration at different types of forest regimes that maybe is something that's coming up here today. I think that'll be a really cool day when the Elliott begins to really have a track record of financial self-sufficiency, but also being a relevant source of new science on forest management and active forest management. That's always been the goal, I think.
Yeah.
And so, again, the land board is not the one that should be, engaged in that day-to-day discussion. And I think this is the board that can kind of really be the leader on that, and then stay within that, that understanding of a semi-autonomous board that is still responsible to a state agency that has to account to the legislature and the governor and the land board. So work closely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Last chance before Jeff escapes.
Catch me on recording now. All right.
Seeing none.
I will come back and visit when I can stay.
We'd love to have you.
All right. Thanks.
You gone too?
I am.
Okay. You may. Two. See you. Talk to you soon. You bet. Okay, on the agenda now is updates and announcements. Staff is going to walk us through some updates, so hold your questions until the end, please. And on the HCP, I think Amy is up first, and slide 5, if we have it.
Thank you. For folks who don't know me online, I'm Amy Price. I'm the forest biologist for the Elliott, and I'm the fortunate one that gets to announce the good news. As most of you saw on May 28th, that the services, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and NOAA Fisheries, issued a record decision under NEPA, and we received our permits under the Endangered Species Act for our HCP for the Elliott State Research Forest. This is a very big milestone for the forest. It resolves the uncertainty status and is important for the clarity on the forest operations for this biennium and well into the future. We received an 80-year permit, which is very rare, so that's very exciting. And there are 3 big HCP conversations going on in Oregon, and ours was the first to get all the way to the finish line here on the Elliott. It's worth taking a moment to recognize where we are and all the work that went into us getting here. And not everyone is here that worked on it, but it was a huge effort, and really appreciate everybody's time.
And I know Brett, who's stepped out, and Ryan has spent so much time on the HCP, and Amy, you too. I know that we were talking last night, and I think that I was more confident that eventually the HCP would come, but in terms of when it would arrive and on this time schedule, I think that was anybody's bet, and probably not a great one that we would deliver it this early. So kudos to those of you who spent a lifetime trying to deliver that. So thank you. Darren, on to the subject of litigation.
Yeah, so I'll just provide a brief update on current litigation. There's been a total of 4 cases challenging Elliott-related decisions, primarily the decision to decouple the forest from the Common School Fund. 2 of those cases are still active, one at the Court of Appeals level and the other at trial court in Coos County. And we had provided for the board a detailed summary of the litigation status by email. So I will move on to the next topic, legislation. As we approach the end of the 2025 legislative session, I'd like to provide a brief update on the successes related to the Elliott State Research Forest. First, I'm pleased to announce that the DSL budget bill for the 2025-27 biennium, Senate Bill 5539, has now moved entirely through the legislative process, having received the final vote in the House last Wednesday, June 4th. Senate Bill 5539 includes just over $12 million total funds for the Elliott State Research Forest, which includes 10 million other funds for base operations and roughly 2 million federal funding carried forward for work here at Shutter Creek. The budget funds a total of 9 positions for the Elliott program. We're also proud to report that all the Elliott-related requests submitted in the governor's recommended budget were fully funded by the legislature. Budget-related conversations this year were positive as the legislature watches our shared vision unfold for a financially self-sufficient research forest. A second DSL was successful in passing Elliott-related legislation this session. Senate Bill, specifically Senate Bill 147, which was the housekeeping bill for DSL in order to efficiently manage the Elliott. The bill accomplishes 3 things. Number 1, it ensures statute reflects the current status of the Elliott as a research forest. This includes repealing old references to the forest in previous form, as well as its connection to the Common School Fund, given the forest was successfully decoupled from its constitutional obligation in the 2019 to 2021 biennium. Senate Bill 147 also moves the Elliott out of ORS 530, the chapter of statute that governs state forests, and formally establishes the Elliott as a research forest in Chapter 273. This is the chapter of statute that governs state lands and is where DSL's other authorities lie. Secondly, the bill also set up a new fund specifically for the Elliott at State Treasury that will be used to receive revenues from carbon credits and timber sales. And lastly, Senate Bill 147 provides the department with delegated authority in contracting and procurement. This authority is critical to ensure the Elliott can be managed efficiently, for example, conducting timber sales and entering into research agreements. Senate Bill 147 received bipartisan support in committee and in both Senate and House floors, having also finished its journey through the legislative process last Wednesday. And both those bills are on their way to the governor for signature. Moving on to the next topic of the carbon project. So the state signed a carbon development management agreement with ANU in November of 2024, which allows us to advance a voluntary private market carbon sequestration project on the research forest. The project will generate sequestration credits through multiple intentional strategies in our forest management plan. We emailed the board an updated timeline from ANU, and we can discuss any related questions. But in short, ANU is now beginning inventory data collection and project development analysis to understand the net carbon benefits and credits. Sale of any credits would not likely occur until 2027. Historically, this process takes 2 to 2.5 years from project kickoff to credit issuance, followed by a sale. For now, ANU has a contract solicitation open for carbon inventory plot work, which will hopefully add to some local employment with contractors working on that, and has listed our project in the American Carbon Registry. The Carbon Registry notifies the market of the project's existence as one that is under development. Meanwhile, we're working with ANU to put together a project summary, which will help inform buyers and the public about the quality and origin of the project and its credits. It's important to note that the carbon project is just one component of Elliott's larger climate and carbon sequestration objectives, and that it will happen in addition to and alongside timber harvest and research. We're advancing timber harvest, carbon credits, and related research as part of a business model with multiple revenue streams and to achieve multiple benefits as envisioned in the forest management plan and underlying collaborative work with multiple stakeholders and communities. That I'll pass it to Brett.
And first of all, you said that you can discuss any related questions, so I will briefly ask if there are any related questions here for Darren on the topic of the carbon project. Okay, seeing none. Brett, talk to us about OGEC training.
Okay. Thanks, Darren, and thanks, Keith. And this will be, I'll make this quick. This is, there will be more to come on email from DSL to board members, but there are a variety of trainings that the state requires of new board members and you all are public officials under state statute. I'm trying to figure out why Emma's smiling and laughing over here. It's because I don't have them with me in front of me. I can fire up my computer, but I have to find my backpack first.
Emma, it's pretty cats in here, so.
Yeah. But based on hot off the press new information from our HR folks yesterday who have been talking with both Oregon Government Ethics Commission and DAS. So there are a variety of trainings. Some are required by DAS, Department of Administrative Services, and the department, and those are done through Workday. And I know some of you have reached out and you've already done trainings through Workday. Other trainings are not necessarily required by the Ethics Commission, but as public officials who are operating under Oregon's ethics laws and public meetings laws, the thought remains that on the public meetings law training that it could still be useful to have the board as a whole do a training together with OGEC. Oregon Government Ethics Commission, OGEC, has been really helpful in working with us and offering kind of as a new board, or knowing this is a new board with new staff and a new program, being willing to customize some of their trainings. And so with the public meetings law training, the thought is on July 9th, do that training as a group virtually with OGEC so that you all can be talking through questions together and scenarios that may come up under the public meetings law together as a group. And then we'll email out the clarification on the others. There may be, I think we're trying to balance and get feedback on what you all want, but also make sure we're doing what's required as an agency. And some of what many of you have already done may already meet the what's required part. So we'll get clarification out. I just talked to our HR folks yesterday on that. Some more to come by email.
Thanks.
But does that still sound, I think question is there still excitement around doing a public meetings law training together as a group, and OGEC would administer it?
Yeah, I think excitement's the wrong word.
All right, not as many people get excited about the law as others. Okay.
But I think there's agreement.
Okay.
Compliance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll double check your schedules for the 9th. And do we have a time on that yet?
It would be at 2, and so the idea was to try to fit it into blocks of time that Hannah had already pulled and carved out on the calendars and not ask for more.
Okay. Got it? Thanks. And will we get some feedback on, I know many of us have done like 14,000 hours of Oregon ethics law training and public meeting law. And so, but the public meeting law, the process makes great sense to me to do it as a board. But if we've done it recently, if we could get some sort of.
That's what we'll get clarification
that'd be
on
great.
by email. Yeah.
So, okay, thank you. Not to duck that at all, but just.
To note.
Yeah, to note that. Okay, got it. Thank you. And.
Back up again. I'm back up.
Okay.
I'll jump back in.
Darren's
My turn
back
again.
up, yeah.
So I'll give a little update on the status of the baseline monitoring. As you notice, we had some of our guests earlier this morning from OSU for part of that. So let's give a little bit of update here. The baseline monitoring MOA that DSL and OSU entered into set for a timeline and next steps for deployment of the federal funds that OSU received a few years ago. This includes coordination with Research Forest staff, the board, and other partners over the development and advancement of a baseline monitoring plan. Federal policy shifts of earlier this year made things a bit uncertain for a while, but OSU has plugged forward and recently finished the hiring process for 2 staff tied to the work, which they were here earlier. That's Chad Hansen and Alex Irving. We hope we would have a chance to meet them. So we did get a chance to do that here this morning. And so we're looking forward to the next steps and having a lot more conversation with them about details. So they're really excited about working with all of us to get that rolling. So look forward to that. Related to that, OSHI's updated the timeline for the next steps tied to the MOA, and we also sent that out to the board, and we'll plan to begin coordinating with OSHI over the baseline monitoring plan development details, and we'll obviously keep the board updated on the plan status and share that when there's more details put together for that.
Comments? Thanks, Darren. Next is board reimbursement policy. I believe Tricario's on the line, and he has some information for us.
Hello, good morning. So I think most of you have already, seen some information about the compensation because I requested the self-attestation form, but I wanted to kind of update you on some information on that. So as outlined in the form, we're required to compensate board members per House Bill 2992, which went into effect in 2021. And this is an effort to try to remove any barriers for folks who aren't traditionally on boards by providing them compensation for their time. So to receive compensation, you have to be what's called a qualified member, which is typically less than 50,000 adjusted gross income. It's twice that for joint tax returns. And then those compensation eligible activities are like board official duties. And you're also required to do that self-attestation form each year. And that's the minimum requirement of the law. However, as we've done in the past, we can, as an agency, choose to compensate everyone if that's what we're doing, like providing the snacks today, that kind of stuff. So as an effort to make sure we're in compliance with that bill, we have a policy, and I believe was shared with you all about what that looks like, how to do that, who's qualified, who's not, what qualifies as duties, how to contact to get reimbursement. Typically that's done through the executive support specialist, which in this case is Hannah. So that packet that you have for the meeting should also have an FAQ document that goes into a little bit more detail about the bill and the process. So the main thing for you to know is that I'll be bugging you about those self-attestation forms. And to request compensation, you'll want to go through Hannah. And if there's any questions about any of that, you're also welcome to reach out to me. I've been working on this with our other boards since it is kind of a fairly new thing. So it might take me a minute to get you an answer, but I will absolutely look into that for you. And any questions for me today? Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And
no
so thanks for the presentation as well. So we're up to public comment. I'm going to take we're just slightly ahead of schedule. So we'll take 4 or 5 minutes here if you want to take a break, walk around, and then we do have public comment. I know there's some folks online. We'll go first with the folks in the room, then take questions or take public comment online. I'll remind those that are intending to make public comment, please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less, and that'll help us stick to our agenda as we can. Thanks.
Let's start public comment
At 10.
Yeah.
Let's go
We're
sooner.
30 minutes ahead right now.
Are we?
Yeah. Did you have the status? Yeah. Recommendations and action items? Oh, shoot. Whoops. Yeah, that is part of public comment. Darren, did you want to have the stuff that it says?
I bumped that to the next, I bumped the replant to the next meeting. So.
The only update we have on prior recommendations and action items is the response to public comments from the 2025-2027 biennial operations plan. Those are included in the board packet and sent to you, I think, mid-April, and you had the opportunity to give feedback on those. Any questions or concerns about our response to public comment on the ops plan?
Okay, so part of the reason to take a break here is that we do have an agenda. If people are coming online at a particular point to capitalize on a 10:15 public comment period. Let's not get too far over our skis on this. If we start with the people in-house right now in the room, then by 10:15 we'll probably be on to those folks that are online, and that way they don't show up hoping to make public comment, and we've already moved beyond it. So with that, and since we're very efficient today, even though it's difficult herding cats and Brett especially, we are way ahead of time, and that's a good thing. So let's take a few minutes, apologize, and then we'll be able to tee off with the folks that are in the room.
Yeah.
Their willingness to get back to business very quickly, and we'll now go into public comment. Again, we'll do the folks in the room first, and then those folks who have their hand raised and are ready online, and I think Emma or somebody is tracking that. The Elliott State Research Forest Oversight Structure speaks to the importance of public engagement, and the board and the DSL will solicit and provide public comment opportunities at each board meeting. I'll now open the meeting to public comment. Again, for the public, please, if you're online, use your raise your hand feature if you're interested in providing comment. When it's your turn to speak, I think Emma is going to be in charge of calling on folks in order. If you are in the room, please use the microphone here at the end of the table, and I'll ask all folks who are speaking via being here in the room, or if you're online, please give your name and an affiliation, or if you have no affiliation, a city, and that would be excellent for us. Please keep your remarks to 3 minutes. Be respectful of others and the agency representatives and the board members too, and we'll help keep track of your time. Thank you for participating in public comment and in being interested in the Elliott and in our management of it, and for joining us today. I'd like to now move into public comment. And Emma, you get to declare who's up first.
That was very informal. Hi, my name is Christina Alexander, and we live adjoining the Elliott State Forest. But interestingly, the road to the Elliott goes through our property and our neighbors, the Grossons, off of Larson Inlet. So we're on Forest Road 3000. And we have fifth generation land there, the land that we live on. And this is my daughter, Annika. She recently moved to live on the land with us. And my granddaughter's the fifth generation. So I've lived there since we came to Coos Bay in 1972 and built a place, a very beautiful, lovely place there. And we love the land. It means an awful lot to us. We love the trees and the animals. And so your mission is very important to us. We support it 100%. But there are some major issues, and I'm not with you per se, but with what's happening in the Elliott. And I'm not sure how aware you are all of the fact that we have an actual garbage dump in the Elliott with sofas and tables as well as garbage. We have a major drug problem in the Elliott, a major partying problem. And none of this is very far above where we live. Our property starts about a mile up. The Grossons have the previous mile. So there was a right-of-way created in 1967 between the forestry department and the forests, the family that owned the property. Interestingly, their name is Forrest. My daughter's name is Forrest. So that right-of-way was well maintained and cared for all the previous years when state forestry managed it. They brushed it, they rocked it. I don't think they did the whole road all the way through, the 3,000 miles, but they certainly took care of that piece of it and I have the document that was, signed. So right now the road is dangerous as well as the danger from the drugs. At our turnaround where you go up to our house, My son-in-law Scott has picked up some amazing drug paraphernalia where it wasn't just people using, but packaging. You thought possibly, yeah. He found a bra and a whole bunch of other stuff the other day, and it's incredible what you find. And so that is happening, and I just wanted you to be aware of that. I'd like to meet with Emma at some point. We'll talk more, but I wanted you to know that, and I wanted you to also know that we're behind you 100%. We appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And Ryan, I know that I'm going to give Ryan a few moments here. Ryan, I can promise you have spent a way too much time trying to chase down exactly the garbage and the drugs and the
I've talked to Ryan on the phone.
So I'm going to give Ryan a few moments to respond.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comments, and we are aware of these situations. What would be very helpful for me is to know specific locations of the garbage dumps where this stuff is happening. Oftentimes from the public, we will receive information about garbage dumps or trailers or abandoned cars, and it actually won't be on the Elliott, and so I can't respond to that. But if we have the specific locations, please let me know, and we'll go take care of it as best we can. I think as far as the road work goes, that 3,000 is ODS responsibility, but I believe once we begin operations in the forest, and if there's hauling out of there, there will be work done on that. And so hopefully it's not too big a problem. I think there has been some work done on the 3,000 lately. I think Lone Rock hauled out of there and did a little bit of work, but again, any specific information, locations are very helpful for us, and we can get people on it and take care of the problem.
I just want to, if I could just real quick, I promise, a few seconds. There are a couple of places on the road with the slides from last year. The county came in and cleared the slides that were on our road on 3,000 because they rerouted people from Allegheny. However, there's a bank that is completely gone. That it's so dangerous. We know how to drive. We know you have to drive way to the left so that you don't potentially fall into Sullivan Creek. But other people don't. And that's I think where a lot of my concern is. There's actual danger there. There's banks that have fallen, and there's no way of identifying. And with brush grown up, you can't tell. So, and I understand it's not, that there's complexity about whose responsibility it is, but there is liability there too, as well as the potential of someone getting seriously hurt. So that's all. Thank you again.
Thank you for your comments and concerns as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Annika Forrest. As my mom mentioned, the land is very sacred to us. We get to interact with all the beautiful nature that you all are working so hard to protect, and we're really grateful for this whole long process that you've been involved with to preserve the natural habitat that we're blessed to listen to, the owls and the ravens and the songbirds every day. As my mom shared, we are concerned that pretty much every Friday and Saturday night, there are cars going up the road into Elliott State Forest, and we know for sure we'd be happy to share locations with you. We know exactly where the locations are up from our road, but those cars are going up there. I mean, it's common to hear a dozen of them at 3 and 4 in the morning on a Friday and Saturday night. So they're definitely going to a destination, usually for partying. They'll litter the twisted tea cans and things like that all along the road. There was also an incident last year where a car went off the road down into the ditch, and a lot of people were telling my mom that it was her responsibility to have to get the car towed out of this location, and those people were coming down from Elliott State Forest, partying, drunk, hit a tree. Vehicle was unlicensed, not registered, no tabs, that kind of thing. So we have issues like that we're concerned about. There's also a lot with, I know that there are gun enthusiasts that have a shooting spot that they go to up there. I know that there are some people that are just outdoorsmen and women, and they're just trying to be ethical about the way that they go about things, but unregulated or unobserved, unmonitored, those things can be very dangerous. My husband stopped somebody on the road down by the Grossens farm the other day that was shooting a semi-automatic, right? And that's not the Elliott problem, as Ryan was alluding to, that particular incident. But there's plenty of that just up the road in the Elliott from us. In addition, I'm at the 2-minute mark, so I'm watching my timer here. There, when I was little, there was a sign that said entering the Elliott State Forest. I don't believe that that sign is there anymore. That was just past our road. So the family homestead, and I just wanted to share this for nostalgia's sake, just so that you know, I'm sure there are many of us Oregonians that have these stories, but I got to play in the family homestead when I was little that was built in 1910. It's fallen into the ground now, but it was there and I remember where it stood. So it's truly sacred for us, our connection to this land and what it means to us generationally. But as I stated, going back to the sign, just up from that family homestead, there used to say a sign, "You are now entering Elliott State Forest." So we frequently have people that don't know. They assume that all the private property just down from the Elliott State Forest is also the Elliott State Forest. So where Ryan pointed out, it's not necessarily the responsibility of you folks to monitor what's going on in private property. The designation, I think, helps a lot so that people know, okay, this is and this isn't. So I'm at my 3 minutes, but thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else in the
Good.
room?
Oh, Brian with a response.
Yeah, just one response. Have you had any success with law enforcement and calling and any
No.
response to help you guys out there?
No, it's no one's responsibility for anything. That's what they've told my mother, is that it's not their responsibility. It doesn't matter who you call, which agency you call.
So sheriff
It's
or
not-
OSP, you're getting no help from law
The
enforcement.
Grossens went crazy, and I guess Jerry's well known being very grumpy and insistent, and we got one sheriff up there, I guess, a couple of months ago about something. So very minimal would be the
Okay.
answer to that. One more thing I forgot to say quickly, fire. That's the thing you folks should be, they are smoking and shooting guns. Oh, I didn't know. I meant to say fire. That's what terrifies me more than anything.
Thank you. I just have a couple moments or a couple of comments on top of my mother-in-law's.
Identify
My name
yourself,
is
please.
Scott Peterson. I am married into the family there. We've seen, since I've been out there, it's been about a year that we've been working on our spot. I've actually seen you on the D Mountain Road before I crossed paths with you.
Yes.
We kind of waved as we went by. The only concern, since I've been out there, I've seen the sheriff one time. Since we've been there, and it was a guided tour with the Grossens. So there was something going on. But I just wanted to introduce myself to the board and just say that we've seen a little bit of activity, but not, I mean, as far as police, I've seen a county sheriff one time on Bean Mountain Road in the last year. And I'm pretty much up there the whole time. If I do hear people shooting, you know, I'll see who's coming down the road. You know, sometimes it's a bunch of people that are pretty high and messed up and you don't want to mess with. Usually it's pretty respectable people that are just out shooting. We have no problem with that. But with their shooting at 10 o'clock at night, 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, there's obviously some poachers going on. We found plenty of carcasses up there. And these are our concerns because it's safety for us. You know, we just want to make sure everyone's safe. So there you go. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have more in-house, Emma, in the room?
Fergus, are you planning?
Yeah.
I'm Fergus McLean. Our family has property at Scottsburg. I'm a retired forester. I've worked in the Elliott a bit. I appreciate very much the service of this board. I think you are an exceptionally talented and capable group. I don't know how it came out this way, but the contrast could hardly be greater between what was supposed to happen under Senate Bill 1546. However, I'm afraid you've set up as a sacrificial lamb because you're the only one with designated financial responsibility for this operation, and it's completely unmanageable because in addition to you and Darren and DSL, you've got the Adaptive Management Committee, you've got the Scientific Advisory Committee with no lines of authority, with no, well, for instance, you hired Darren, but you have no supervisory authority over him or his decisions. I heard Senator Anderson tell the committee, the Ways and Means Committee, said, this is it. No more state money. $10 million. That's the end of the line. OSU is asking for $35 million up front plus $10 million. Dan Newton's financial analysis called for $25 million startup funds. This is barely enough to keep the lights on. And you have all these conflicting, overlapping, as Jeff called them, sideboards on your operation. But really, like any business, if you're going to turn a profit, you need a business plan and you need the authority to execute the business plan. Fortunately, under the terms the land board has laid out, all you have to do is agree with DSL and you can modify the scope of your authority, which I think is absolutely necessary. If you've seen Dan Newton's financial report, it's very pessimistic, and he points out that anybody operating in these brutal timber markets needs deep pockets. You need a financial reserve because if timber prices drop below $500 a thousand, you're losing money. Of course, you're a public agency, so you're not going to go bankrupt, but I don't know what will happen. I'll tell you what will happen. You guys are going to be sacrificed. I mean, that's probably what's going to happen when the inevitable takes place. And you're the only body that's capable of pulling all these threads together. But you can't do that unless you have the authority to make decisions, control hires, set budgets, delegate responsibilities, hold people accountable.
You have 3 minutes. 30 more seconds.
How time flies when you're having fun. Very quickly, but seems like the only resources at your disposal right now are the potential for carbon value and for hiring expertise. I gotta say, I don't know who these new people are, but the idea that you got 10 years of carbon income and then it's over, that doesn't make any sense. I don't know who these people are, but I would watch them very carefully, and you should be the one that's watching them. This has all kinds of implications, financial and silvicultural, for the forest. You guys need to watch these guys. I would not take anything they say without a grain of salt.
Okay, we want to be fair today because we gave everybody else 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Fergus. Is there anybody else in the room who'd like to take advantage of public comment? You do. Name and organization.
Drew Farmer, Coos County Commissioner. Good to see you, Melissa. I've been tracking this a little bit. I came into office for this position 6 months ago. What's my time limit?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay. So I've read through the plan for the Elliott to the extent I'm sure there's many plans out there, but I read through at least one of them. And saw the revenue anticipated to be generated by the forest harvests. And then I'm particularly interested in the carbon credits aspect during the duration that there are timber harvests. I'm interested in how that revenue share, when Shutters Creek closed, it was over $6 million in payroll and $4 million in contracts locally that left the community. And I understand where this comes from, and I understand the concerns about funding this facility. From my position, as Shutters Creek closed, the state didn't really do anything to compensate for that loss. So from my standpoint, I want to see what is gained in our community through this transformation. And I understand that's a challenge for the state, but the state didn't much care when it made a change here, so I don't much care what the state's problems are when it comes to this. The carbon credits, I'm going to have to learn more about. I've had a lot of trouble finding information on that, and I understand that's because this is very new. There's only one other state doing this, so I expect there to be challenges and delays in that. But my interest there is what the formula will be, because as timber harvests occur here, there is the added impact that there will be additional timber coming to local mills. I'd like to see some kind of guarantee about the percentage that will be sold to local mills to ensure that is what happens. But with the carbon credits, there are no jobs created by that locally that I understand, certainly not as many as there were when this was a prison, not as many as would be with timber harvests. So I want to know, as this progresses, what the distribution of funds will be for those carbon credit sales. I've got to look now. I didn't realize there's like a 10-year sunset on that, but yeah, that's the part I'll be looking at. There's an arguable economic benefit to the timber harvest locally. I do not see one related to carbon credit sales. So we've got to find a way to patch that hole. I appreciate that y'all have contracted with one half-time deputy with the county. That does assist, and anywhere you can contract with local services, that's going to be a benefit to the community because that's more investment in the operations of the county and the benefit of the citizens. But the carbon credits are going to be a high point of interest for me. I give you 12 seconds.
Thank you very much. Emma, how do we look online?
I don't think we have anyone online. I mean, we have people online, but no one
No
wanted
one,
to give public
no one with a
comment.
hand raised?
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you all for your comments today and spending the time with us and your interest in the Elliott as well. So we're off to, let me find out where we are. And our discussion, so on discussion items, our discussion items for today is the Elliott State Research Forest budget allocation approach. Darren, this one's with you.
Yep. So in the board meeting materials, there's a draft proposed budget allocation approach, which I think is page 10 and 11 of your packets. And I think we have copies of those documents in front of you there. Yeah, we didn't print the whole huge packet, but those are documents in front of you. This table is a more detailed breakdown of the proposed spending areas than the pie chart overview that's up right now that we used when we presented to the Ways and Means Committee of the Legislature in April. So as covered in updates earlier this morning, we expect we expect to fully requested $10 million biennial budget for the research forest. Once the governor signs the legislatively approved budget bill, this will be solid, of course. At our July board meeting, we'll be asking for the board's recommendation on the proposed budget allocation approach. This is just we're doing the discussion portion, just kind of giving you a heads up before we come for the next meeting for a recommendation. The pie pieces in the graph in the left column, categories in the allocation table we prepared reflect broad service areas of importance to the department, the land board, the legislature, and the public. As you can see, the largest chunk of funding is proposed for funding work items in the community engagement benefit category. So I'll touch on a few of those in a little more detail here, so I'll give an update on staff. So we still have 2 more positions that are approved that we're in the process of hiring. One of those, the next in line, is the research coordinator position. So just an update on that. We have a position description completed and approved by the state from DAS for approval, and so we're just getting ready to work with HR to start the recruitment on that position. So that should be coming out fairly soon for recruitment. The other position we have is I think it's called listed as a data analyst. It's called a data analyst. It's probably a data analyst, some GIS, kind of a combination position. That's the next one in line. I'm just working on completing the PD for it, so it'll go through the approval process with the state, and that'll be the next one up for recruitment as well. Another area here just to call out is in the community and economic benefit category, the wildfire protection costs. We'll just draw attention to that. I'll continue to be paying that, and every year that continues to go up a bit more, and so we've tried to allocate for that in here what we think that may go up the next year again. And as already mentioned, we did have an increase there because we are finalizing the agreement with Coos County for the halftime deputy position. So, which kind of relates to some of our comment earlier that hope to see we'll see some increased presence from the sheriff's office dedicated to the Elliott. So,
And I was going to ask on that, and I think because of our previous comments, do we, as we're finalizing that, do you have a guesstimate, and I'll ask Commissioner Farmer here too, on how much time that individual will be spending on the Elliott?
So I can share that from my communication from the sheriff's office directly. So that will be the expectation will be 20 hours a week
so a full halftime.
Full halftime.
Excellent.
Yes. So I hope to see, because that was something that I recognized coming in here just from my past experience of having that law enforcement presence and knowing some of the other areas as well have that. The local other timberlands have that type of arrangement. Thought that was an important thing for us as well. So hopefully that'll help a bit. And that's set to start July 1st with the new biennium. So let's see, research and partnership section. Note that this line item that would support the research projects that are in the BOP over the biennium and intended to cover other partnership activities that may emerge. And then I have also, there's the research and education piece where we have funds that are set aside. Of course, that's one of the other items that's teed up for the next the land board meeting in October for us to provide updates on the status of where we are with the recreation and education planning, as well as on that subject, any other items that we want for updates on the forest management plan, any proposed updates we might be considering would be something else we're set to discuss with the land board in October. So implementing work over the upcoming biennium, the reality is actual operations may result in a need for more or less money in these individual service areas. We have internal flexibility at DSL to move funds across the line items in order to address needs. Being, of course, that we can't exceed the total $10 million allocation that we have. So it's important that myself as the manager and staff were able to work within that flexibility to address the operational realities that may come up as we go along. That said, we also intend to remain transparent with the board and the public. Our proposed approach is to provide budget updates to the board, tracking where we are at given points in time on expenditures and revenue. This will certainly be part of the annual research forest reports called for in the FMP, but I could also use the board's feedback on what shorter interval time periods it would like for updates. Also, if shifts in expenditures are anticipated to exceed more than $100,000, we'll make sure that I made a particular effort to inform the board and the public on this and the reasons for it, and we would do that at the next scheduled board meeting just to make sure for transparency and updates. That would not entail coming back to the board to ask for another recommendation on the overall budget allocation, but would allow for discussion, guidance, and, like I said, transparency over when we're making those adjustments. So the main discussion questions for today's agenda item are, the first one, do board members have any reactions, concerns, or questions about the proposed allocation approach? And secondly, do you have any guidance on periodic timing or approach you would like to see for regular budget updates?
Board members.
Sure.
Thank you, Caitlin Marvel, on the line. One question about the wildfire protection for the $1.1 million. What does that look like on the ground in terms of protection? Getting to that money.
I'm gonna let Ryan address that because you're a little more up on that.
So that 1.1 million, that's for 2 years. That is our rate that we have to pay to Coos Forest Protecting Association for any fires that come on to the Elliott. We basically support the entire district, and that is our share of the cost based on the number of acres we have. And so so if there's a fire in the Elliott, they come, put out the fire, they do suppression efforts, and that money is sort of there in a pool along with other landowners to be able to cover those costs. So that's really the benefit. It's almost like insurance, you can say, in some ways.
So it's basically on-call fire protection.
Yeah. Supports the district supports the Elliott and other landowners within that district, and we have a pretty big share of that cost, even though we rarely have fires on the Elliott. So that's
Yeah, everybody.
Ryan,
You're welcome.
Ryan, is this just the standard per acre assessment?
Yeah, and an administrative fee, and it's gone up considerably. When I first started with the Elliott in 2019, our annual cost for the Elliott was around $315,000. Now, last year it was $555,000 annually. It's gone up exponentially over the last basically 4 or 5 years. Yeah, for a variety of reasons.
Caitlin, good.
I just wanted to also point out the $25,000 for operation equipment, software and supplies, and wondering how, I know data and data management is a big thing that this board is interested in, and I know the staff are interested in making a lot of this information more publicly accessible. And it sounds like even just the reporting and understanding what activities are happening in the forest and how we collect that data and look at trends. $25,000 doesn't seem to go very far. What are you anticipating?
So the intent there was that because we know that some of that is wrapped into some of these other figures when we're talking about the HCP and the other, so we had that other kind of a line item for kind of the other miscellaneous related items that weren't necessarily captured in what we had for the line items for the HCP monitoring and that. So you'll see some of that expectation to cover those data costs are already included in those other line items.
Okay.
So yeah, certainly, we weren't expecting to cover all of our data needs for everything in that 25,000. No, that's for was kind of a catch-all for some other things that weren't necessarily fall into those other categories.
Okay. It would be helpful in our next update to just get a sense of how much money is actually going into data management, even if it's in other line items. We get a sense of, I think that's a huge cost that goes undervalued in a lot of budgeting. So, and then one last question, and I apologize for hogging the mic, but in response to the county commissioner's comment, of this budget, how much of it do you anticipate going to local contracts?
I think besides obviously the sheriff's office, that helps with the sheriff's office. The intent would be, we're hoping that one thing we talked about was I guess it's not our direct contract, but it's part with the carbon project for hiring local contractors to do some of that work for the inventory, the plot layout inventory for the carbon project. It's certainly our hope that as we contract for the other operational implementation needs we'll have, that we hopefully would create opportunities for local operators, local contractors to bid on those projects and do some of that work.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick follow-up on that? Does DSL procurement policy allow for local preference or consideration in competitive bidding requirements?
I don't know that one offhand.
Yeah, I don't know that either. I think in some ways there's a better chance for locals to get these contracts because of the extra expense to be built in if there was, say, a contractor from Portland trying to get those jobs. Likely they would be priced out of the procurement bidding process just because they'd have a lot more travel expenses or whatnot. So I don't know of anything there. I think as I've been in previous procurement processes, I think there's an anticipation to, hope that locals will bid on this, on that kind of work. But I don't think there's anything specific that says, you get preference. It's going to come down to pricing for the most part. And then obviously, experience, resumes, those sorts of things to get the work. So that's probably as much as we can tell you at this point.
Haley, did you have another question?
I have a few questions, but I think other people have their hands up before.
Okay, Jeff?
Sure. Does this work? Okay. So I had two questions. One is maybe a bigger process question you had related to your question about feedback on that. So you were saying in July we'll be asked to actually approve this, but also it seems like it's already being spent, or we're going ahead with some things. So I'm kind of interested in a little clarification on if we're hiring a research coordinator and we haven't approved the allocation. So it's kind of just a clarification of our role question. And then the other one has to do just with the research coordinator and whether it's a 0.76. Is it is the other point whatever shared with somebody else, or how does that work? So those are the two questions.
So the 0.76, they were put in that way. Apparently that's a fairly common practice. I'm new to the state, so knew that's kind of a practice, and we have the ability to adjust that. And they kind of figure based on, and correct me if I'm wrong here on this, Brett, that they kind of assume that because that person won't necessarily start right at the start of the biennium, and so it wouldn't be using a full FTE. That's part of the reason why they have the funding at a 0.76 versus.
So it would be someone hired full time, but it's just the annual allocation is 0.76.
Yeah, I think that's the.
That's correct. That's usually how Legislative Fiscal Office does that. Is
That's
when you
helpful.
get that new position? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That answers that one, because I've been asked to be paid part time and work full time in my life, and I'm like,
that's not the intent.
I don't recommend it. It's not good for morale. So then just the other question about kind of like our role in terms of, because I don't have any major issues with the proposed allocation, but I'm kind of curious about where our role is approving this comes, given that it's already going forward.
Well, so I guess we're not spending any of this money yet because we don't have. Actually, this governor hasn't signed it yet, so things not dry on this yet. So it wouldn't be. This would be effective for July 1st. So I guess So we're not really spending. We've been busy spending some of the this year's budget, but not tapping into next year. So just trying to be ahead of the game as far as for the hiring, of course, to be ready to recruit. Since that wasn't a part of the approved plan in the FMP to have that position, wanted to make sure that I'm trying to get that out the door because it is tied to a lot of some of the other discussions we've had around the research process, and it's a key position to have up and running here. So.
So just one bit on that, and I understand that, and also it was only approved recently, the bill. Get that, but I was just thinking optimally, one would want to approve a budget prior to the year starting. So just kind of looking for those opportunities to make sure that we're doing that in that order rather than the retroactive. That's all. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, like other one-off.
Yeah. Another one of those.
Just
your turn.
Great. I think one of my questions is about that 0.76, but related to that is there there's a lot going on in the state generally with all the federal changes related to staffing, and also thinking about other local staff that DSL has present, and thinking about just kind of the responsibility to be conservative with Elliott dollars given where we're at with revenue. Is there any talk of leveraging and sharing resources with other DSL local South SLU? Just looking at GIS specialists and other things like that, are there opportunities to build resilience locally and maybe not hire lots of new folks, or is that a part of the conversation at all?
I guess as much as I can say that right now, I can say that the manager at South SLU and I have had some discussions along with Chris a little bit about where can we work together on things, where does it make sense to do that, and so I guess the most I can say at this point, and I can follow up on this some more with the board, is we've had some initial conversations about this to kind of daylight that and have some discussions and see what might be possible. So that's certainly something I could follow up on with the board.
Yeah, I think it's a strong thing to explore in relation to that. Another question, just there's in the community and economic benefit section, there's the temporary sales restoration planning and and then restoration, site prep, and stand tending, and there's a really big monetary difference between those two line items. And obviously just the emphasis on getting timber sales out soon. Could you speak to just a little bit more about what's in that first timber sales category and kind of the contracted services you expect related to that work and availability of contractors to get things done on a shorter time scale?
Comment on that.
I don't have the numbers in front of me. What I can say is that now that we have the HCP, I think there's going to be a pretty concerted effort to get things done on the ground. And that's probably going to be a combination of internal staff and then contracting. And so okay, where are the numbers? Right there, okay. Yeah, okay, so so it looks like there's 1.3 million in there for timber sale prep. So I think this first initial timber sale, and I'll get into that a little bit in my presentation. I think we can get going with our internal folks, but we'll definitely need support to get that thing to the finish line. The nice thing is with the operations plan, a lot of the work that Eric did, we have a lot of the sort of office documents ready to go. We have maps ready to go. We have inventory. So we've got numbers there, and it just needs to be put out on the ground. And a lot of that work is going to be in the extensive allocations. That's going to take a lot of work. But I guess getting back to the point of this is that, we're going to have to get moving pretty quickly. And I think we'll have the resources available to do that.
A follow-up question to that. Invasive species management is obviously a really important thing to consider on the forest. Where is that showing up in the budget? Up until this point, all of our invasive species management and control has been through our roads contractor. So they have a staff person that's a licensed pesticide applicator, and so done a really good job. In fact, if you sometimes are curious whether you're in the Elliott or outside the Elliott, you can see where the Scotch brim stops, and then you're in the Elliott, because we've done a really good job of that. As part of the new road services contract that Titan Kelly they'll continue to do that. There is an optional service that they can continue to do that if the staff wants that to continue. And so they've been very diligent about that, and a lot of it's roadside stuff, right? That's where the source of a lot of the problems are. And so hoping that'll continue to be. It's not in here, but it would be part of their already established contract they can do. And is there any work being done outside of the right-of-way?
A little bit inside of young plantations, where Scotch broom has gotten in there, or other invasives, tansy, whatever. They've been pretty diligent about that.
Sorry.
No.
Questions.
I was just going to say, before I get to your next question, I was going to say one thing on this. One more thing here is just that, of course, there's some, like everything else with the Elliott, this is the first time we're doing it, and so a lot of this is an estimate of what we think it's going to cost, and so, there's going to be some wiggle in here, but this is kind of best with Ryan's expertise of being here for longer and trying to figure out what we think the costs are going to be until we actually start doing it. We'll know more, just like a lot of other things here. So but go ahead, Elliott.
And then just one kind of common part of the question. I think that community engagement and relationships and education is going to continue to be one of the most important things that we do over these next few years, and that is really time-consuming work. And so just acknowledging, I think like having Emma's position is really strong, and I know other staff will be doing that as well, but just thinking about that in terms of like staffing priorities, or are there places where contracts or other partners can help. But I just think that that's really important, and just want to make sure that that's prioritized in the budget. And just curious a little bit about the there's that section on research and partnerships of kind of what is anticipated in the partnerships. I see there's some info just about like in-stream restoration, indigenous partnerships, capacity support, but if there's resources dedicated to that broader community presentations, education, relationships piece.
So I think there's a whole lot of more discussion around that. I guess for one thing, I can start off from myself as the manager saying that that is recreation, education, those other and partnership pieces are very important to me. And so that's a priority for me as well, along with everything else, of course. I can share a little bit about on the recreation just a little bit because I actually attended a training last week on the visitor use management framework, which is actually what we have in the forest management plan is what we decided in the plan and what we're going to use kind of as our framework to work on that recreation plan. So we made some contacts and to look at how we can start that. So we need to be prepared to have an update on planning for that plan for the next land board meeting in October. And so I have some background in that myself. So I think it's going to be a joint effort, and also was able to talk to a couple of potential people that do some of that contracting work in that area. So we're going to definitely do some more digging on that now that a little break now after getting festivities yesterday done, to spend some time on planning on what kind of what that will look like next, and definitely be bringing that with the board for discussion about what we're planning, we're looking at how we're going to accomplish that. So stay tuned for that. It is on my, so I want everyone to know that's on my radar and it's on the list. We'll be making progress on it as well.
Mike?
Yeah. So, Darren, you asked about how often we would like to see budget numbers. Quarterly would be great. Just as something to start with anyway, and see how that works.
How's that ring with everybody else? Does that sound for the board for quarterly?
Yeah, I think that's included, budget and how close you are on track.
Expenditures.
Yeah. And knowing that some of our spending most of our spending, or much of it, won't be done equitably throughout the year.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So I think we all understand that. Is that it, Mike? Peter?
I should know the answer to this. Will someone clarify for me what is the role of the board in relationship to the budget? Is this advisory, or do we approve a budget? What is our position?
So my understanding, it's a recommendation that the board makes a recommendation to just like the rest of the oversight, our oversight structure that we have, is that it would be a recommendation, just like I'll be asking about the recommendation for the operations plan, the budget is, and that falls into that same category.
I think that's right, Darren.
Thanks, Chris. Glad I'm getting it right.
That's
Thank
definitely
you.
right. Yeah.
And really, our budget's a recommendation. The agency that gives it to the governor, who then has a recommended budget, and then it's the legislature that disposes in the end, of course. With that said, I know we're going to get our budget soon, and I think I've mentioned this before as we get into our cadence with the board. In the fall of this year, I would really like to, have at least one of your meetings think about recommended or your suggested maybe legislative concepts for the next long session, and then as we get information from Darren and his team too, we can talk about suggestions or recommendations for the 27-29 budget early on, because we as an agency we start forming our budget and our legislative concepts for the land board and then the governor's sort of purview later this year in 25, and then then we'll take our legislative concepts for their consideration to the land board in February and maybe April of 26, and then our suggested policy option packages for the 27 budget also go to the land board in April or June of 26.
Hey, Chris, I know there's been some discussion, and I think from a board point, we'd all be or most of us would be very interested in some sort of fall retreat. We'll have a new DSL director on board, and it would be a chance for us to get to know one another, and also a chance for us to begin to discuss those budgetary needs that we can anticipate, coming up in the next budgetary process. So,
That sounds great.
okay. Peter, any further questions? Peyton? Mike?
Kind of triggered it when you were talking about the budgets and bringing that information to us. Mike's question. So are you talking about a budget to actual
Yes.
document? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Bringing back?
We could do that, yeah. Because I'll get a report periodically from our internal accounting staff, so that would be easy for me to share with the board. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that was my next follow-up is that, do you have that information readily available back to you, like where you are in your budget?
Yeah.
You get that quarterly?
Yeah, I'll have that. I can have that, get that, work with our accounting staff to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
With DSL, yeah.
Cool.
Just a quick follow-up on that too. Not only would it be handy for knowing how expenditures have gone, but also how revenue has come along too. Obviously, that won't be first few quarters.
Yeah,
at
be
all.
out a little bit out, but yeah.
Be out there a ways, but
Yeah, certainly we would do that as well.
Thanks. Melissa?
I think the only thing I have is, Haley brought up the idea of local contracting, which I think is a great point, and not playing lawyer on this, but I will say, as far as I know, there is no provision to allow for a local hiring preference, but I would like us to make sure that we are advertising locally as much as we can, so our local contractors and our local citizens are aware of what we're doing.
Certainly we can do that.
Thanks. I know it can be a challenge these days with the newspapers not being as prolific, but I think, between all of us, we can help you.
And other organizations that we can get money information out through, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Melissa, it goes through Oregon Buys is
Yeah.
our process. And so the thing that we can make sure is that all the local contractors are in Oregon Buys, and so they can get the notification for when those come out. So that would be a key for us, because that's really where the procurement will go.
Well, and I've seen those notifications come out from Oregon Buys. Even if you can make sure that we get them and we can share them out among our networks, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and it can be clunky too, and it's not everybody's wants to be in through that system. Unfortunately, that's what we have to do. So
Yeah.
Some of the smaller companies, to be competitive, need to make sure that they're in there.
Thank you.
I just had a quick follow-up.
Jennifer, I
Can
think you were up
follow up
first.
on that one? This goes back a long time when I used to work for the state, and you guys know this, but how will you bundle a contract can also make it more or less accessible to different sizes of organizations. So I know that also can be more work. So I'm just saying it may be something to keep in mind, is that how one puts stuff out can make it more or less accessible to companies that might be not the large ones. So
You go through an RFP process, not just a highest bid process.
yeah,
so
and
there's
like,
ways to structure
and
it.
again, sometimes you don't want to break things up because there's really good reasons not to. And sometimes if you do think about phasing or things like that, it just makes it easier for different scales of enterprises to get involved. You know that.
Yeah, related to that, I wonder if there's an opportunity to lay out just like this year we anticipate these types of contracts going out as an early communication. I think that can be really helpful. We use that with local contractors a lot just for construction stuff. And it's been really appreciated and valued by them so that they can plan and think that through. But I also just thinking more about like that accessibility piece, like an Oregon Buys being a system that not every local contractor has probably had experience with or even knows about. I'm sure some do, but is there an opportunity to do a local training or education about the Oregon Buys system that could maybe kind of help local contractors take advantage more of just state contracts in general, but certainly related to the Elliott?
Yeah, and I think our procurement team could certainly do that. They're pretty good about that. So if we have the names of those folks, those contracting companies, consulting companies, we can put them in touch with our procurement folks, and they can walk them through and make sure that they're in the system. Are they understanding it? And I don't think it's overly complicated, but I do understand that there's a lot of folks that, may just not be know it's there. And so that's a big thing. So we got to make sure that we get a full list of the local contracting companies. I think most of them will probably be in it. My guess is for the size of these contracts we'd be looking at, but there might be some that are they're missing. So.
And you guys are looking at more than just timber contracts. We're looking at hiring a recreation planner. We're looking at potentially hiring outreach, branding developments. I think also thinking about the diversity of contractors. One last question I had is, there's a heavy investment in this for all of the line items that are not just the staff line item. The staff allocation is actually a pretty minimal portion of the budget. And I think the answer to this might be no, but I want to ask it anyways. It's a lot of work to get all of this in place so it can go on the staff side. And just listening to Jeff's comments of like consistent progress, like there is so much on the staff plates. And you can have all these priorities and all those things that you want to move forward, but if you don't have the staff to actually move those forward on pace, it could really gum up a lot, including revenue. So is there any opportunity, if there are flags identified in that, to add LDs or seasonals or anything to help with particular projects or workload issues as are identified? Because right now, it's a guess. These are all new positions and new workloads, as you guys deeply understand. And I'm assuming that's a no, because that might have to go through the legislature, but just wanted to ask anyways. I think that the staffing piece is really important to keep a pulse on as we stand up the forest.
And I think that would be something, just like I said, being myself, unfortunately being new to the state, about what my leeway I have there as far as that midstream. Maybe Chris, if you're available to chime in on that or not for flexibility, might be. But did he? Okay. But that's something I can follow up on that with board on that. I can look into that and see what my flexibility might be.
He's back.
I'm here, but it was super quiet, so I didn't. If someone wants to repeat it, I'll try to answer.
I can paraphrase. It was kind of what flexibility we might have, Chris, during after we get into the new biennium, if we discovered that we had some additional needs for staff, what flexibility we have for LD position or temporary type work. Do we have that flexibility to do that without going back to the legislature during the biennium?
We do. We would work with Gene Strait, our Deputy Director of Finance. It's not uncommon for us to, if we can fit it within the framework of the monetary value of our budget, the bigger umbrella, to hire temporary positions certainly, and make a case for limited durations. And we have not gone. I don't think we go back to the legislature for those.
Thank you, Chris.
Good. Thanks. All right, board members, anybody else with follow-ups? I'd add one thing with the coming aboard on July 1 of 20 hours of patrol a week. One of the things that we might suggest that they do is go talk to our good neighbors to begin with on day one. Excellent. Okay, with that, we're going to move on in a few minutes to board business and with some action and advisory items. But prior to that, we're a little bit ahead of time, but I'm not going to take the full 15 minutes. We're going to take 5 minutes and take a break, and we'll be back in 5 minutes and move on to board business, actions, and advisory items. Excellent. Our board meeting action item today is the 2025-27 proposed biennial operations plan and related research proposals core to the Elliott's forest management plan and habitat conservation plan. Darren, this is on to you and to share with us the board and the board for procedures for these items.
All right, thanks, Keith. So as the research forest manager, I'm looking to you as the board to make two recommendations to me today. One around our 2025 to 2027 draft biennial operations plan, and the second specific to individual research proposed on the forest and summarized in the operations plan. In conversations with DSL leadership and with the Oregon Department of Justice, we've outlined the following procedure for movement on these items. So I'll walk you through that here. So in your packets, you'll find 2 documents titled Elliott State Research Forest Board Action Item Cover Sheet. These provide the framework for decision making for both the biennial operations plan and the proposed research. And kudos to Melissa for working with staff on drafting the templates for those cover sheets.
I love a good template.
So within those cover sheets, staff has outlined the background and fiscal impact for staff recommendations we're putting before you. Staff have also provided suggested board recommendation language to you for each of those items. The cover sheets then outline proposed options and suggested motions for each item. So basically, Elliott staff have offered you, the Elliott board, a recommendation, and I, as the manager, am looking for you to provide me with a recommendation based on the information provided. In the case of the operations plan, Elliott staff have recommended the Elliott board recommend that the Elliott manager adopt the BOP, which will be followed by my signing a decision memo to formalize that adoption. I would adhere to the Elliott State Research Forest oversight structure language and approach on this, which directs deference to the board recommendation unless there are reasons for not doing so are clearly articulated. In the case of the research project proposals, Elliott staff have recommended that the Elliott board issue a recommendation that the Elliott manager provisionally authorize research with specific determinations made for each of the 4 proposed projects, as well as general contingencies. Provisional authorization is appropriate here as we have a number of contingencies related to this item, foremost of which is our legislative approved budget being signed by the governor, but also other contingencies crafted based on interest expressed by board members. If the Research Forest Board recommends I provisionally approve certain research as outlined in the cover sheet, this decision will also be formalized in an intergovernmental agreement between DSL and the related research institutions, which in this case would be Oregon State University. This IGA would provide funding, contingency conditions, and access authorization. So just to reiterate, Research Forest staff have provided recommendations to the Research Forest Board. As Elliott manager, I'm looking into the Research Forest Board recommendation on whether and under what contingencies to adopt the 2025 to 2027 biennial operations plan, formalized by a decision memo signed by myself, and provisionally authorized research on the Research Forest, formalized by an intergovernmental agreement. Any questions?
Just about
About process, yeah, process. If not, I'll continue through my spiel here. Okay, I'll keep going. So we'll now walk you through each of the 2 action item cover sheets, beginning with the background and staff recommendation approach on the biennial operations plan, for which I will get over to Ryan.
Well, I've been told based on my previous off-script inter-Vicky related presentations that I should not go off script. So Emma has carefully written what I will say today, and I will do the best I can to read this somewhat robotically as we go through here. So I'll start with the first thing.
So if you sense that there is more than the usual squirming coming from Emma here, you'll know that you probably went.
Yeah, she's sitting next to me for a reason because she can kick me if I'm going on script. Yeah, exactly. Yes. We're at 2 minutes into it. I'm off script. Okay, so I'll walk you through the steps we've taken to develop the biennial operations plan, remind the board of when and how you were brought into the process and how we engage the public. I'll end with how we identified initial timber sales. All right. This is small font too. To begin, we'll look at the Elliott Forest Management Plan. Oh, okay. Bigger script. Okay, bigger font. Which calls for a BOP comprised of a mix of treatment types that you're well aware of. That includes intensive, extensive, and restoration thinning. Also, as you know, we contracted with Farm Unlimited in the spring of 2024 to support this work. The process began with an initial screening of candidate stands, and that was more of an office exercise, and then that turned into taking that process, the initial identification of candidate units, and then really going out in the woods and verifying that those what we were initially looking at would kind of come into play there. I'm going off script. And so Eric and his team did a lot of work there to make sure that we can operationalize those units that we saw in the office. So with that, once those candidate stands were identified, those became what we call projects. And I think we initially engaged the board in the summer of 2024. I'm back on script. Since then, we provided BOP-related presentations and updates at each of the board meetings as various elements of the BOP were being finalized. Draft BOP plans were presented to the board at both the February and April board meetings this year. Also is presented at 2 public listening sessions. The February meeting kicked off that 45-day public comment period, and then we conducted other engagements with the interested public along the way. So we coordinated this public review and comment process with the Elliott Board review. In total, we received 19 public comments on the draft BOP. You received a copy of those of our draft responses in late April, and our final responses are included in your board packet today. In our response to public comments, we provided clarity on multiple topics, including the relationship between harvest and research, emphasizing the land board's vision for a financially self-supporting forest. Also, the research forest process for developing our research program, details on restoration thinning treatments, and our enrollment in the voluntary carbon market. We've also made an effort, doggone you, Emma.
It's like halfway through.
Yeah, we're trying. I can speed read. We've also made an effort to respond to board input, notably clarity and connection to social and economic monitoring, as well as our research approach. This is captured in the revised operations plan language, as well as described in your action item cover sheet with reference to the FMP section on social and economic monitoring that provides specific direction. Throughout the development of the BOP, TSL has also worked to ensure consistency with the provisions of the HCP and the FMP. And then now, the good news is that since we have secured a federal incidental take permit through the completion of the HCP, our path forward to initializing operations is much clearer. Pause.
There's quite a bit left.
Is there? Okay. Speed read. The BOP proposes to authorize a variety of different activity types on the forest, including harvest treatments, habitat restoration, fish and wildlife management projects, recognitions, monitoring, and research. We will continue to provide wildfire protection on the Elliott and other ongoing activity like hunting and other recreation, firewood permits, and we'll continue to undertake a more formalized planning effort for future recreation and education on the research forest. So here we get into what we propose as some initial harvest treatments. I think some of you are familiar with this. We have, Eric and I have identified Farm Unlimited, and I have identified 2 initial timber sales to move forward. The first sale combines project 4, 10, and 12. That includes 111 acres of intensive management, an estimated 3.6 million board feet, and also 161 acres of extensive ecological forestry management, totaling a little over 2 million board feet anticipated from that sale. 3.6 million board feet. Yeah, I can't use that other language. It's not how I speak. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's a reason this is my last presentation at one of these meetings. Okay. So that is one sale, and so we're going to combine those together. And then a second sale is going to include just restoration thinnings. That is project 8, 9, and 17. These are all designated as restoration thins. The sale will cover just under 200 acres and yield an estimated 2.3 million board feet. I'm not going to go off script because I really like to, but I'm not going to. So this candidate pool approach contemplates DSL being able to draw from the pool of BOP projects over the course of the upcoming biennium, starting with one clearly identified set of those projects as phase one, depending on capacity and market response, assuming phase one moves forward to contract completion. We would then have the ability to digest what we've learned and move ahead with other candidate pool projects without coming back for further BOP approval. Any candidate pool projects not completed during the 25-27 biennium due to capacity or other reasons would be rolled forward into the next proposed BOP for the next biennium.
1 second here.
Yes.
So of the projects, you have the combined projects 4, 10, 12, and 12, and then 8, 9, and 17.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate that one combination is a phase one and another combination is a phase two, or their next phase, or how do you see that?
I would anticipate that all of 6 of those projects
Will be phase one.
Yes, would be phase one. Yeah, and really a lot of that is testing what we see as the interest in, especially the restoration thinnings as a package by itself, and so how interested would purchasers be in those projects, and so we wanted to separate those from the other 2 treatments, other 2 allocations to see. It's kind of testing the market.
Okay.
What interest would there be, and if that doesn't sell, then we would look to repackage and think about a different way to do it.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay. Should I just ask that? Okay. Should I just read from this then? Okay. BOP adoption enables timber sale, harvest, restoration, and on-the-ground implementation. Harvest revenue support Elliott operations, staffing, and monitoring. Are there any questions? Are there any questions on fiscal impact?
How many, I was writing down numbers, but not sure I got them all accurate. Is it like 7 million board feet was anticipated this-ish?
6.
Yeah, a little closer to 6. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's phase one.
And that's phase one. Yeah. Yeah. With the idea that those would be, like we talked about earlier, hopefully ready to sell, maybe end of the summer, early fall, something like that. We want to get them sold this year for sure.
With contract services for all of them.
Yeah, probably need some help there. And then I'm going to slightly go off script here so you can understand the financial side of it. Those would be sold under likely 2-year contracts. The only revenue that would come right at the time of sale is a 10% bid deposit. So there would be some Scotia revenue coming in, and then the rest of the revenue would not come in until they started to log.
And that 2-year contract allows them to choose the time and
yes.
The most appropriate time.
Yeah.
To log.
Yeah, and if we try to put any more constraints on it, like 1-year contracts, or hey, 50% of the value of the contract has to be paid within 1 year. Those are things that have been that do happen. I think we would not want to do that because that will definitely lower the bid price and interest. So we'd want to stick with 2-year contracts.
Questions? Maybe from a previous meeting, I thought you were saying that you did not think we were gonna be able to meet the harvest projections, in the plan. Maybe I misunderstood that, because it sounds like now you are talking about we will harvest, or maybe it was selling it but not harvesting it within the period, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we'll have the capacity to get all, we have earmarked right now 2,300 acres, which again, some folks are like, that's, above what is allowed. That is not true. Actually, we can do that many acres because we have the extra 400 acres that can be done for restoration thinning. I'm not sure they'll all be prepped and sold within the 2 years, but we hope to get probably most of those done. It's just a matter again of capacity. So that's probably going to be the case, just because we're starting off 1 foot behind here. So.
And I think part of that comment, Ryan's comment, I know he's made this before, and it was in light of Vicky's intent to see harvest in this year, this calendar year, and I think he's been pretty clear that it was unlikely to happen.
Yeah, the only exception could be the Baldy Butte communication site. That'll be a separate contract. I think though some of that we are hoping to be able to use root wads and sections of trees for restoration work. And those might have to be staged, but there might be some wood go out the door with that one. But that one's kind of a separate project, but in this BOP.
Ryan, 2 things. First, thanks for all your work on this and everybody's. And maybe I should know this, but is there a provision for a minimum bid? And is there an anticipation that if log prices were to tank, that there'd be a place where we would change course?
So there will be an appraisal process as part of putting together the sale packages. Based on that appraisal, what we do is somewhat of a conservative appraisal, so that will set a minimum bid price, and we have to be comfortable with that price and accept nothing lower. And so if we're comfortable with that minimum price, then that would be the floor. If once they're sold, if the sales are sold, and there is some problem with the market and there's some balking by the purchaser. In the past, there can be an extension on contracts. I don't think we'd want to do that here. You bought the sale, committed to it, you got to get it done. And there's penalties that are involved with not completing a sale on time, contractual problems. So, as far as setting the minimum bid price, that's through the appraisal process.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Board, further questions? Okay.
Well, that was off script.
You did very well.
Okay. So.
You need a tablecloth though, so if you kick them, we can't see.
Yeah.
My shins are already
Sam.
sore, believe me. Okay, so the staff recommendation part, this I definitely have to stay on script. The Elliott staff recommends that the Elliott board recommend that the Elliott manager adopt the 2025-27 biennial operations plan as revised and presented at this June 11th, 2025 meeting. The BOP is consistent with the Elliott mission and management policies and with FMP intentions for a phased adaptive implementation approach, a range of FMP project types, and relevant research and monitoring. It provides a starting point for operational learning and demonstration and is responsive to Elliott board feedback and public input received during this draft review process.
Now, if you were going to go off script and say that, that would be the time.
I shouldn't do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You should or shouldn't?
I should probably not.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll talk afterwards.
Okay.
He wants to be able to walk out.
Yeah. Okay, so with that then, I'm going to jump ahead. Is the rest of this in terms of where we are and suggested motions. Are we ready to get there? So there are some suggested motions, and the board does have those available to them. There, you can see that there is a fiscal impact anticipated, and the adoption of the BOP will allow the Elliott State Research Forest staff and contractors to begin implementing timber harvest restoration treatments, and other activities with associated revenue and expenditures. The ESRF staff recommends that the board recommend that the, yeah, I know, I'm not going to do it again, that the manager adopt a operations plan as revised and presented. So suggested motions, there's a motion, an alternative motion, and an alternative motion number 2. You have those before you, and so I'm going to leave it up to the board here for comments, and hopefully we have a motion and a second.
Sorry, Keith, are you looking for discussion right now, or would you like a motion and then discussion?
I opened it up. If there was any discussion, now would be the time. But if not, we don't see any discussion, then a motion and a second would be entirely appropriate.
Why don't I make a motion, and if anyone wants to second it and discuss the motion?
Okay.
All right. I move that the ESRF board recommend ESRF manager adopt the 25-27 biennial operations plan as presented and consistent with the action request document and supporting materials for this June 11th, 2025 agenda item.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any other motions?
No discussion.
No discussion, or discussion
No,
first?
no motion.
Oh, okay.
Any discussion?
One motion.
One motion. Okay.
I have some discussion. We can, if this,
Now's the time.
if this
Now's
is
the
appropriate time?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to speak up because I know that other Oregonians share variations on my thoughts and feelings on this. And I'm using some notes to be respectful of your time. I'm very supportive of and excited about so many aspects of both the forest management plan and the famous BOP, including the need to move forward in an expeditious way with active management. And I'm really grateful for all the work that's gotten us to this. I think it reflects well on our ability as staff and a board to work well together. At the same time, I feel that the biannual operation plan raises important and central questions that we've not had an adequate chance to explore and answer. And until they are answered, I feel it's not appropriate for me to support the plan. My concerns and reservations have to do with what I see as inadequate agreement between core high-level goals that are articulated in our FMP and the actions directed in the BOP. And some examples from the forest management plan of language that you're familiar with that are right up in the front there are, one, quote, adherence to strong and enduring conservation ethics. That's on page 1.2. Second one, quote, operational and fiscal integrity maintained. And I assume that that means fiscal integrity, not just in the short term, but over the long haul. So how these stands would fare 80 years down the road. That's on page 1.3. And then a third one that's pertinent is the forest will, quote, enhance productivity and conservation values, including forest health and climate resilience. So that's a commitment made on page 1.4. So my comments are grounded in many factors, but two stand out. One is I've recently had conversations with the two scientists who proposed the triad model and outlined how it would be implemented. So basically they wrote the triad pieces that are in here. And I can't and won't speak for them, but I encourage you to do that. You can learn a lot by talking to those two scientists. And the second piece that particularly informs my thinking is my family has a 130-year history of implementing intensive practices, ranging from 1850 to 1980. And I wrestle with the daily challenges of keeping a Coast Range fir plantations alive and profitable. So for me, these issues are not theoretical. They're part of my daily life. So here are the four questions that I think we should be asking and answering. And many of them are familiar to you. So number one, the Elliott is rightly committed to both generating useful new knowledge and to responsible long-term stewardship. it's inevitable that those two come at times into conflict. And when they come into conflict, we've not yet answered which is the higher priority. It's my sense that the triad is based on the acquisition of knowledge having a higher priority than responsible, what I would articulate as responsible stewardship, which is identified in the FMP. So the question is that appropriate? And is that consistent with FMP goals? I think we haven't answered that, and I think it's fundamental to the work we're doing. Number two is, are the assumptions that the triad model is based on valid? Including one of them, I learned through my conversation, is the assumption that growth rates and productivity for the fir plantations will remain constant for the next 80 years of rotation, in spite of the challenges of global change and other pressures. So that's question number two. Question number three is, application of the triad model involves two dimensions. One's the silvicultural applications that we've been hearing about that are in the BOP, but also the second piece of it, to be true to the triad model, is a companion system of rigorous research. So the question is it appropriate to implement the former without having solidly put the second piece of that in place, the research that would underline and really justify why you're doing the triad model? And third is implementation of the intensive strategies in the BOP appear to be at odds with core commitments that are articulated in the FMP. Is that acceptable? And I read some of those examples. I could read them again if you want, but I won't. So I understand all of the good reasons to push ahead with the forest management plan, and I'm assuming that the board will recommend to do that. But to communicate and underscore my level of discomfort and concern, I'm going to choose to abstain when we vote. And I hope that you see that as a constructive move as opposed to being obstreperous. So in the spirit of being the person I'd like to be, which would be positive and constructive, I have a couple proposals to put before you. One is, I would like to see this board and staff in a timely way discuss those 4 questions and figure out how you're going to answer them. I have opinions, but I'm just one of many opinions. 2, I would like to see us work with the experts who know the most about the triad model to review the assumptions and assess the suitability for applying it to the Elliott. 3, as hard as it may be, I think we need to acknowledge that considering and choosing the core research questions should include input from a wide range of Oregonians and not be made by a small number of people from a single institution. I think it's important to correct the mistake that's been made as part of developing our future research framework. So have a broader take at what are the questions and who should be the ones who are articulating that. And 4 is, I'd like to see us integrate analysis of the anticipated impacts of global change on all of our Elliott decisions. Climate stress, disease, insect, wildfire. How resilient and reliably profitable will the fir plantations that would be called for in the BOP be in the second half of their 80-year rotation? So in 2100, will these be providing the kind of outcomes, particularly the financial predictability that we've heard over and over in the last 24 hours? So I'm very grateful for all of the hard work that people have invested, and I thank you for taking time to consider these things. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Follow-ups? Okay, seeing none, I will return to a motion and a second that the Elliott State Research Forest Board recommend that the manager adopt the 2025 to 27 biennial operations plan as presented and consistent with the action request document and supporting materials in the June 11, 2025 agenda item. So with that, I will seek all those in favor, simply say aye, and we'll move on to those opposed. So in favor of the motion? Aye. Aye. Opposed? There we go. Thank you very much.
One
And
abstain.
abstain.
Oh, and abstain, and abstain? One, right? Okay. Moving on, thanks.
Sorry, that felt like a really substantive comment that we just kind of blew past. I just want to pause for just 1 second. Like, I really appreciate that. I appreciate the time you took to like think about that and articulate that. And I would like to see us be responsive to the 4 questions that Peter outlined and see if we can find a way to prioritize that degree in a timely manner. I think we've actually been grappling with a lot of the concepts that you just brought up in many of our other conversations, and we've kind of continued to truck on, but I think they're going to keep reoccurring consistently. And so I'd really like to see us prioritize that, and just thank you for your thoughtfulness.
Thank you.
I second that.
Mike?
Yeah, I was going to catch you afterwards, but if you have handwritten notes there, but if possible, to get a copy of those sometime.
Sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
took notes, but.
Yeah. And all of them, I don't see it as being urgent. And again, I know we're going to go ahead and you can see that there's a big piece of me that says, of course we need to do that. But I'm trying to be constructive about things like, what are some of the underlying stuff that in our day-to-day, like task-oriented thing, what can't wait? Like, what are the deeper questions here that we really need to engage with? So my intent is to constructively try to put those on the table and figure out how in a timely way that's supportive of the reality that we need to get the show on the road. How do we engage with those? So that's where I'm coming from. I think you sense that.
Okay, thanks. And so, Mike?
I was going to say that that sounds like a great retreat topic. Sit down and talk in depth about this.
I'll type them up and share them.
Thank you.
And before we move on, I would just like to, I know you're bifurcating the vote, but to me, this vote on the research really dovetails as a great follow-up item for what Peter was saying. And, just being able to look at this more collectively, I would have preferred to have waited to vote on both of them simultaneously to have that more integrated discussion. And I recognize we need to vote because Jennifer's going to leave. But to me, I would like to come back to Peter's conversation after the research discussion, because I think some of that can be built into how we move the research pieces forward.
After the discussion, before the vote for the research?
Yes.
Okay.
And I wouldn't rush things because of me. I'm probably going to need to leave before we get to a vote anyway. So don't shortcut any discussion on that. That's more, the discussion is far more important, in my opinion, when we get together.
Okay, thank you. So we'll remind me to do that if I skip over that. We are, Ryan, I think we're back to you. Or
No, it's back to me.
Back to
My turn for the
Darren,
research. My turn
Darren.
for the research.
Yeah.
We'll give Ryan a break. Oh, my turn again. All right.
Oh, we are. You're right.
So the proposed 2025-2027 biennial operations plan marks a big shift for the Elliott. It moves us from setting things up to actually getting work done on the ground. This reflects the transition to active operations and research that was always what was envisioned for the research forest and is captured in the forest management plan. Reflected in this operations plan are 4 proposed research projects. The forest management plan makes clear that research should be advanced as part of each biennial operations plan, and it's DSL's responsibility to do that in coordination with the Research Forest Board, following the oversight structure that we've adopted. Under that structure, the board plays an important role by advising the forest manager on proposed research plans or programs. Earlier this year, the State Land Board formally adopted the forest management plan as an administrative rule. The FMP contains a dedicated process on how research at the Elliott gets proposed, reviewed, and approved. DSL has adopted internal guidance that confirms this FMP direction so as to avoid any other confusion with other rules, as well as the process for authorizing research in the near term while we work to establish the other structures and functions as outlined in the FMP, such as establishing the Science Advisory Committee and hiring a research coordinator. As please see in your packets that detailed titled document, Internal Guidance Memo, for greater detail on that topic. DSL received 4 research proposals for this biennium. We feel each of these proposals aligns with the core principle direction in FMP Chapter 2.3.1.2, including consistency with the Research Forest mission, management policies, the HCP, FMP, and the management structure. The individual tables in your meeting packet in the Summary of Foundational Research Proposals document captures details related to the consistency with direction in these documents, as well as other factors flagged as important by board members. We refer to them as foundational because they connect directly to the FMP chapters and direction therein, as well as research forest design, planning, and work that preceded the FMP. So I'll go ahead and skip into fiscal impact. Authorization of research proposals this biennium would result in fiscal impact dependent on the board's funding level recommendation. If authorized, next steps would include development of intergovernmental agreements that would pass funds from DSL to research partner entities. In addition to this, expenditures for advancement of research are expected to result in economic benefits at the local level as research efforts are carried out, although much of what's proposed this biennium is relevant to research design and pre-treatment monitoring. So I'll go over now the staff recommendation. Research Forest staff have recommended that the Research Forest Board recommends to the Forest Manager go ahead and provisionally approve funding for research proposals 1 and 2 for the 2025-2027 biennium, with a few conditions outlined below, both general and project specific. These conditions are relevant to FMP direction, as well as what we've heard from board member interest and input. This approach helps us keep momentum on the foundational research planning that's already underway, while also recognizing that we're still in the early phases of implementation. It also allows time to sort out the longer-term research governance structure and process moving forward. So now I'll kind of walk through those general conditions that I mentioned that apply to any research project that we would authorize funding for under the operations plan. First, funding is contingent on DSL's budget being approved by the legislature, which has been, and the governor now, and on funding allocation approach for the research forest that can support these projects. That's something we'll be working to resolve at the July board meeting. Second, we need to have a formal funding agreement in place between DSL and the research entity. Third, we're looking for clarity on how the baseline monitoring plan being developed through the OSU DSL MOA agreement will support the monitoring needs of each of those research projects. Fourth, within 12 months of provisional approval, we're asking for documentation of efforts to engage with tribes around each approved research project. Fifth, if researchers plan to seek research forest funds again in the future, we're asking for a demonstration of matching fund efforts and any success in securing those funds. And finally, all field work must comply with Chapter 2.3.1.5 of the Forest Management Plan, which lays out guidelines for research activity on the ground. Catch my breath. Now, here are the staff recommended moving forward with each individual proposal. So proposal 1 is the River Corridor Restoration Experiment. Recommend provisional approval for 2 years at either Tier 1 or Tier 2 funding levels. For proposal 2, the edge effects on marble murrelet occupancy. Also recommend for provisional approval for 2 years at either Tier 1 or Tier 2 funding. For proposal 3, the remote sense biodiversity monitoring, recommend a statement of support based on the current NASA grant application for the project. No research forest funds allocated at this time, but we're open to revisiting if their NASA proposal is not successful. And proposal 4, the benchmark site for NASA climate models. I would recommend, once again, also recommend expressing general support and interest, but no funding at this stage, and encourage submission of a more detailed proposal in the future, while in the meantime, resolving questions from proponents on this effort by confirming our intent to move forward with fine-scale LiDAR data collection called for in the FMP and the availability of data use by researchers, and supporting coordination between the research team and research forest staff to align their needs with our approach to the nature and timing of future LiDAR flights. Based on board member advice, we developed individual project tables for each of the 4 proposals, which are labeled as summary of foundational research proposals in your packets, that speak to the amounts in these funding tiers, as well as how each of these projects addresses various direction and objectives for the Elliott State Research Forest.
Okay. We're back to discussion again. Questions for or potential motions, but we'll open for discussion first. Mike?
Darren, on the paperwork that you provided on this type of thing, it says there public comment was received and it's attached, and there was nothing attached as far as public comment. Can you just summarize what? To the bottom. Yeah. Oh, okay.
So the research was summarized in the blog and then included as a
Okay, so it wasn't something separate to, okay.
not specific to this.
And then the other question I had, if I remember correctly on proposal 3, they were asking for money. And I assumed that that was asking for that money in addition to asking NASA for grant funding. So I'm not sure if, kind of here, the recommendation is that they come back if they don't get funded by NASA.
And I think that's where we landed, is that we would still just wait to see. We would obviously support the proposal, but we would revisit that if their NASA proposal ends up not, if it doesn't get funded, then they would come back and we would have that discussion again for funding.
If they did get funded from NASA, is your recommendation that we not provide any funding for it? They just use the NASA funding?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just curious about that recommendation, because I mean, I think if they, are we disincentivizing other people to aggressively seek funding by having a de facto, if you don't have an application in currently, we're gonna seek to fund you at full tier 1 or tier 2 level versus treating that third one differently?
I guess it's a little different because they had the NASA proposal in, is probably why we were looking at that, because that was their primary source of funding. They weren't necessarily asking us for a, so I guess that's one of the differences, and maybe someone else can chime in on that knows a little more about that one. But yeah, maybe restate the question again too.
Yeah, it strikes me that we're treating that proposal differently in terms of funding consideration. The staff recommendation is different. And I would assume, especially given your 6 things that you laid out, one of those being match funding, it just seems that the other projects should be aggressively seeking external funding. And it just feels weird that we would not to give one funding that is aggressively seeking funding. Like, that's just a very odd. In the grant world, that's definitely not how it generally works. And like those other folks, including them, if and when they don't get that NASA proposal, they would highly benefit from having match funding. And also, is it like, I just want to make sure we're not sending a message to the other proposals that they should aggressively be seeking additional funding as well. Especially given where we're at financially with the forest. What messages are we sending with that?
I'll just clarify that as initially, when we received his proposal, there was no request for funding. It was only upon asking the researchers to tier out their funding request to us that Matt came forward with a funding proposal. So he hadn't always asked until we sort of prompted him to. I see where you're coming from with that being messaging, and so I think maybe we include that in our expression of support if that's the decision the board decides to take, is we appreciate you. Okay, it's very close. We appreciate your efforts to secure outside funding and would like to continue to explore this with you, something along those lines. I understand the dynamic you're calling out, though.
Yeah, I think part of it too is just because we had so little process going into this.
Yeah.
Did everyone know that the board was likely to fund it? Did all of those researchers come in knowing that they could ask for funds and were likely to get it, or did Matt come in not knowing that, so he was seeking permission and showing, like, it just kind of fairness and consideration
moving forward?
I have another question too. But,
Go ahead.
I see that the staff recommendation includes funding at either tier 1 or tier 2 level for proposals 1 and 2. Just wondering, like, the background in that and looking at that budget item that kind of pulls research and partnerships all together. Is the staff thinking it would be stronger if we only funded at tier 1 because you guys feel like you could use the funding for the other items in that portion of the budget, or are you guys thinking tier 2 feels good with other priorities that you have for that funding? Just a little more background on that piece.
I think we left it that way because it feel like we're comfortable with either of those at the funding, from the funding side of things, but also wanted to leave that flexibility for the board to not, we weren't trying to lock into one or either of those, but recommended that we were comfortable from our side with the money that either one of those would be acceptable from that standpoint, and just not trying to leave you that space, I guess, as the board to make that recommendation.
Yeah, I think the only challenge is just without having much information on what the priorities are in that line item, because they're all pulled together. It feels challenging as a board member to make a decision between like tier 1 and tier 2 level of support. And then did these proposals, like, are they scalable? Like, if they receive tier 1, could they go out and get some things done, or would the whole project be moot unless they get tier 2 level funding?
Yeah, that was gonna say, that was my understanding, that they can still get stuff done. Yes.
The difference between tier 1 and tier 2 funding wasn't substantial. I don't have the figure, unfortunately, but it wasn't
Looks like
like
it's just
an
shy of
exponential. Yeah.
100,000 on both, but
Yes.
just in terms of a force that has no revenue, 200,000 feels significant to me at this point. So just curious about that.
So are you suggesting that be a tier, whatever the motion looks like, it's at tier 1 funding?
I'm definitely swaying more towards that. I just, maybe next biennium when we have some timber revenue, but I'm really hesitant to do that with the lack of revenue right now. I understand the value, put your money where your values are in research. This is a research force, and then I see the value in funding that, but I'm definitely leaning more on conservative, but also acknowledging that the funding climate for match funding is abysmal right now, and the ability for researchers to get funding now is different than it was a few years ago. It might be in a few years, so I understand that tight spot too, which is part of why I was asking about the scalability. Is even with conservative funding, could we still get some research done on those proposals?
So again, just seeking clarification there. With your research background and your expertise, and you kind of you said you could see both funding at either level, but your preference would be?
My preference would probably be to do tier 1 until we have a better process stood up for the entire consideration of proposals, and we have more confidence in revenue generation.
Okay, thanks. Caitlin?
I'm sorry, can I ask Haley a question?
Yes, please.
For all 3, Haley, or for just the first 2?
Yeah, the third, I'm still a little lost in that one, and maybe that's a good question. The first 2 proposals seemed like the F&P connection was a lot stronger. And I'm looking forward to hearing everyone else's perspective on this. This is just my isolated perspective.
Me too. I was just curious. Thanks.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Thanks. First, I just want to thank staff, because this was definitely a lot of conversations and a lot of digging in with individual board members. And I think that the difference between what was presented at the last meeting and this really reflects a lot of input and discussion. So thank you for that. To kind of piggyback off of Haley, I actually like the tier 2 funding for these proposals because it is such a marginal increase, and primarily it's going to fund graduate students. And so supporting initial research at that graduate student level, that is a huge value, and starting the just supporting education and people just getting started in their career, I think is really important. So I see a very high value, and it doesn't commit us to funding these projects in the future. And in fact, to Haley's earlier point, having that condition in there that they have to demonstrate matching funding in the future, I think helps us put a sideboard on that. So I think not only, especially looking at the monitoring budget line item and how expensive that is, these even funding at tier 2 are a significant bargain for what we're getting, the questions that we're answering, the leaning into the research component of the research forest, and still leaving about $700,000 left in the budget line item for partnerships, which the partnerships piece is going to take some lead time, and we don't have a good understanding of that. So I think $700,000 to spend on partnerships in this biennium is a really big chunk of money that we're going to have to race to get that out the door in 2 years. And so I think that that's, to me, it's a good balance between the two. And moving forward, I think that the proportion will likely shift because research will be able to bring in matching funding. We're going to be requiring it. So that means more of the money will be able to go into the or more of a percentage of the money will be able to go into the partnerships. Getting to Peter's earlier comments, I really like all 4 of these as a way for us to test the assumptions. This FOP does not adopt the triad approach, but it does look at 3 different treatment types, and using this research to look at especially how the forest as a whole is responding to those treatment types over time. I think that's where the remote sensing and the biodiversity analysis is really important. We've not been in a position where we can compare intensive and extensive forestry against each other in the same landscape. And we have a lot of research on intensive forestry, but we don't have it in a really good controlled situation against the more ecological based forestry. So this is a unique opportunity for us, and I feel like the research, especially research that's really hard to fund in these preliminary baseline settings, is really critical for us to start to answer those questions that Peter has raised. I think we all have opinions on them. It would be great to come to those conversations with actual data, and that'll help us have a more robust conversation over time. I think it's really important for the adaptive management component of this for us to understand how we're going to be evaluating these research and these forestry methods moving forward. And as long as we don't have a good way of collecting data, then it's just going to be a lot of people speaking to their values and their positions. So to me, these 2 things really need to go hand in hand and help us have a more robust conversation about Peter's 4 questions and concerns. So that's where I stand on this. I am fully in support of the tier 2 for all 4. Well, for the first 2, and then the other 2 are not asking for funding, but I think we should definitely have a full-throated support.
Any other comments from board members?
One thing I want to put in just as a placeholder, but you go first, Mike.
Sure. Just a couple comments related to tribal involvement. I like that I had this question earlier, and it's kind of addressed in your, I think your general contingencies or expectations. What they were called now. Yeah, general contingencies. And number 4, where you're talking about documentation of an effort towards tribal engagement within 12 months. Correct?
Yes.
So I like that you have some expectations spelled out, so that's good. I'd like to see us get to a spot somewhere where the research proposal has been developed with some tribal engagement or tribal previous work. Because, kind of flipping it around, rather than after we've designed this proposal and brought it out and got it funded, then we're going to involve tribes. But if we could do it, I know it takes some time and a lot of work for these folks, but some encouragement to see that the research proposal has been developed with tribal involvement. So that was one. Um, the other one was maybe a little bit more specific. I think in proposal 2, they're talking about tribal engagement and researchers approaching team to work with Coast Range tribes. And I guess it's great that they spelled out the Coos Lower Umpqua Isla, which is fantastic. But I guess that term, working with Coast Range tribes, is a little, I'm not sure exactly what it means. More of a geographic area. If that's tribes that currently have a reservation bases in the Coast Range or some historic connection to the Coast Range. I'm picturing maybe a tribe that has a confederation that has one tribe or some tribes that came from the Coast Range to their current confederation. So obviously there's some complexities there when I see terms like that. I guess if we go forward and fund that proposal, that we clarify that they've identified a geographic area that where they're going to work with tribes, but encourage maybe much broader. That limits it down quite a bit, and that concerns me. So, that's all I have.
Okay.
Thanks.
Peter, I think you were up
Yeah,
next.
my comment builds on what you said, Mike, and it weaves in something that we've talked about in a past meeting, which is two things. One is I'm super impressed by these proposals. That I think we all know this is sort of a crawl, walk, run progression, and the crawls results I think are really something to be proud of, and it looks great. And a thing I'll note is all of these are from Oregon, from one institution. A lot of them are people who had an inside track and were already connected to the Elliott, which is completely logical and it's appropriate. So I'm not criticizing that as the crawl step, but I think as we think about what the walk and the run steps look like, I think we need to be really hyper aggressive about one, always welcoming that one university, but casting a really broad net, and particularly involving the tribal piece, not as like give us some advice later on, but from the get-go, and which would include back to our research question kind of topics. Is so how do we, people are shaking their heads because I think we all agree on this, but I just wanted to put on the record, is as we keep moving this forward and build on this really important, exciting work, how do we do that in a way so that no one would have any reason to say, hey, this was not a fair process. We didn't equitably get it out across all the kinds of researchers, both in state and out of state. They're out of state researchers I know who are very interested in this work. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Thanks, Mike.
Build on Mike's comments too. Sorry. To build on Mike's comments too, the last thing tribes want are, here's our proposal, please say yes. They want to be involved in developing it, if they have time and staffing to be able to do that. But different question. When we had some of our, I forget what we call them, little workshops, just not with the full board, there was discussion of a timeline and everything on getting the research process set up. Can you give us maybe an update on where we're at on that?
So, how close do we need to be? Is that good? Okay. I don't think any additional updates from what you've seen in our last work session, but I think next steps would be putting together a research committee of the board to help reflect back on that framework that we've put forward and refine it, and then move it forward from there. So I know a few of you are interested in joining a research subcommittee, but please reach out to me and we can get that scheduled.
And I would echo support for tier 2 funding for the first two proposals. If I remember right, tier 2 was what their initial proposal was, and then tier 1 was a little less, and tier 3 was if you had more money, or am I misinterpreting that? When we went back out to them to say, flesh this out some more.
I think that's accurate to say. I'm not sure how exactly the numbers line up.
Okay.
I kind of echo Haley's concerns with funding at tier 2. I can certainly live with that and get on board, but I think that I personally would like to lean towards being a little bit more fiscally conservative before we have revenue coming in the door.
Okay. And I'm sort of where Caitlin was on a tier 2 funding preference, and I can live with tier 1. Haley, I think I interrupted you.
I just forgot I have a comment from Jennifer that she wanted me to share before she left. Jennifer said, I support moving forward with the proposed approach and research. I advocate for intentional pursuit of proposals for social science research. This can also support the points Peter brought up regarding questions we should continue to engage with.
Okay. And Caitlin, you wanted to bring up some points that Peter made. I think those were the ones you made earlier, correct?
Yeah, and I think we've kind of danced around it, but the concern about the sort of triad design and whether or not we're moving forward with that, and this being able to step back and evaluate and look at some of the decisions and the assumptions that have been made. How are we going to intentionally do that? What's the framework that we're creating, that criteria that we're creating for reevaluating our assumptions and potentially changing our approach? And I think that, it's not something that we can answer today, but I think it's going to be really important for us to be intentional about that moving forward, and that these two pieces have to work together, and we have to bring them together in those questions. I do think that standing up the Science Advisory Committee sooner rather than later. I know in your packet you said coming back to the board in October. It'd be great to have a much more developed and robust proposal for what that starts to look like, so that we can address some of Haley's concerns, so that we can start to say, okay, as the data come in from this research, what does that actually do in terms of the next set of questions that we ask? How do we develop the priorities for research moving forward? How do we involve broader voices, external voices in determining and evaluating the research proposals? I think those are all concerns that we share to different degrees, and it'd be great to get on a path to start to address some of them.
Okay. Well, then I think we're at a point where I will seek a motion. You can see the suggested motions before, and it's probably, in fact, that motion should include a specific tier as well, whether you are proposing a tier 1 funding or tier 2. So with that, I'll seek a motion and then see if there is a second. Mike?
I move that the ESRF board recommend the ESRF manager provisionally authorize the research proposals outlined in 2025-2027 biennial operations plan, consistent with and subject to resolution of contingencies and direction contained in the action item cover sheet and supporting materials for this June 11th, 2025 agenda item at tier 2. And that would be my motion. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I have a clarifying question.
Please.
At tier 2 for 3 proposals or just 1 and 2?
Proposal 1 and 2 as recommended by the staff.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for funding of proposals 1 and 2 at the tier 2. And does that include on tier 3 a recommended statement of support? So or do we?
You mean for proposal 3 and 4?
Proposals 3 and 4 rather, right, that's what I meant, not tier. So
yes, my motion would be that.
Okay, so we have funding for proposals 1 and 2 at tier 2, and also statements of support for proposals 3 and 4. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Call the question. All those in favor?
Wait, we have to have discussion still, and I'd like to make a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
It's that, I
thought we were having discussions.
I know, but I have a comment on that. I appreciate that we are at a very unusual place of where we're at, but in the future, it's very difficult. I'm going to agree with Haley. It's very difficult to know whether we're funding this at 1 or 2 when we don't have any broken out budget for partnerships. And so, I had done my own little math chart to try to figure out where this left us at. If anyone is wondering, that leaves us with $747,377 for any other research or partnerships through this biennium. I can support it, but I'm very uncomfortable, honestly, with the way this process has gone, and I hope it will be very different in the future. So, thank you.
I have a process.
Further discussion
is where it's easy to go to like, what's the vote and who has the votes that count. I'm a real fan of how we can reach agreement on things. So I have a question for Peyton. My sense is this isn't your preference, but is this something you can live with?
Yeah, I
can we approach this from a reach agreement point of view as opposed to just a straight up and down vote? Because I think just from a procedural point of view, that creates a very different culture in a group than who's got votes. But are you okay? It seems like you were the one that might have had a different proposal.
Yes,
But
I can very much live with tier 2.
Okay. Is there anyone else who?
Haley?
Yeah, I can live with it. I think I'm just, I echo what Melissa said. And I think like maybe just a reminder to us too of like, this can be revisited as we know more about what's in that partnership budget and how is that going, or did we totally blow the budget getting the timber sales set up, which is a priority, and so that has to come out of somewhere because no one's adding money to our budget. So I think like funding today those 2 projects, but knowing that as there's more detail in the budget and more communication regarding the budget and more progress towards a process that there can be more conversation and decision points moving forward. I would hate to see a scenario too where like a tribal partner comes in with a research proposal and we say no because we scooped up our entire budget in this decision here today when we didn't even ask for a call for proposals. So I think just leaving that flexible.
And I'm on the same page. I guess I've been on too many boards where we then point back to a decision like this to say, well, that's how we've always done it. And I just want to be clear that I don't think this should establish this should not establish precedent in any way. We should agree that this is a one-off, and in the future going forward, it's different.
Point well made and appropriate. Okay, I don't want to jump the gun here again and be admonished. So I believe we've completed discussion. Is that true? There we go. So we have a motion and a second as previously stated. And I'm not going to repeat that again.
My mom voice.
Yeah. Jeez, I was looking for Dad to get another. Dad, help me out.
Take you from there.
Yeah. So I will now seek a vote. All those in favor of the proposal and the motion and second? And aye. Opposed? Abstentions? None. So we have passed the motion as made. So unanimously.
And salute to the staff for the hard work that went into it. I mean, I think this is really impressive compared to where we were just 4 months ago. And I think particularly Emma deserves a lot of credit for really working this hard to change it to happen.
And so before I think we have a working lunch.
Yes.
We have. Okay. So before we go, I'd like to say as chair, I'm pleased and grateful, and I think the board has done great work today and in moving forward with getting this forest up and operating in a way that funds research and anticipates harvest as well. I think that's the promise we made to the state of Oregon, we made to the legislature, and we've done that repeatedly. So to the board, kudos, good work. And I think the questions that came up and have been responded to in the in the future discussions we're sort of committing ourselves to are great points as well. So we are in a good place, a better place than we were yesterday. So with that, let's take a few minutes of break for lunch to everybody gather. And is it?
It's all set up outside in the parking lot.
There we go, man. Meeting outside, and then we're going to gather, come back in, and we're going to try to stick to a 1 o'clock adjourn time. Thank you.
Good job.
Good job. Eating your lunches quickly, and we are recording. Thank you. So to quickly review, we've passed a BOP. We've passed a provisional research plan, and we're then at a point where I'm going to let Darren talk about an agenda for the next meeting and a reminder of the meeting date and so forth. So Darren?
Yeah, I'll just jump in for that. So the next on the agenda, we have the next board meeting is scheduled for July 9th. So a couple of potential topic items. Well, one for sure we need to do would be, since we had the discussion topic for the budget, we'll do the actual recommendation for the board, asking for that recommendation at the July board meeting, since the budget will be signed by the governor by then. So that for sure would be an agenda item. I'm planning on coming with a discussion around the current work plan as it is right now.
And that's July 9th.
July 9th.
That?
July 9th, yes.
That's virtual.
Yeah, and we'll do that as a virtual meeting, yes. Yeah, we'll do that virtual. An update to the work plan that we've kind of been working off on, and kind of talk about maybe how the board can have spots for certain board members on to be involved and work together on some items off that work plan. One thing in particular, since I mentioned it earlier about the recreation, since we have that asked before, and I know a couple of the board members already engaged on that, kind of the research kind of subcommittee we had going, and that's all. I guess I'll ask if there's anybody else who's interested in that as well. But I'd also like to seek interest on if there's a couple of board members that would be interested in kind of working with me on a subcommittee for around the recreation planning piece too, because I'd like to have some assistance with that too. So you don't have to decide that right now, but at least we can maybe think about that for the next. I'll bring that up at the July board meeting or if you want to reach out to me in between that and say, yeah, I'd like to do that, you can do that too. So that's kind of what I was thinking for board topics. Obviously, if anyone else, that's kind of the point here, is if anyone else had any potential topics for July. We're planning to try to keep it, a virtual meeting, and also probably keep it a shorter, not as long as this meeting was. So I just want to put that out if anyone has any suggestions for board topics. Okay.
Also be using that for the training.
That would be, we have that set to do that after that. So if we had a 2-hour board meeting, we then have it set so that we could do that other training right after that same day.
There be an update on the science advisory committee research? Like, what is the piece of that, like, in order to be like prepped for October, or
That sounds like something we should talk about. Yep. Yep.
I was going to add to that as well, towards the end, is that in addition to the Science Advisory Committee, we have the Implementation and Adaptive Management Committee, and that does require a board member to be on that committee. I'm drafting a letter to recruit folks, but if you know that you want to be on that, please reach out to one of us, Emma or myself. I'd be thinking about it. It's in the HCP, but yeah, that committee needs members as well. And I'm looking at the members that are not going to be from the Elliott board as well. And if you have suggestions of folks that you know in like the academic community or technical experts, advisors, if you're like, oh, I know someone would be great. It's not me, but I know someone else. Please volunteer anyone that you think would be a good candidate.
I had a related question. I know in the past there have been some discussion, I think amongst the three of you, about whether the board and staff wanted to learn more about kind of the details of what is ecological forest management, what does it mean, what are the uncertainties, who can we learn from? Is that still of interest to the board, and is it of interest to you? Like, where are we with that topic? Both in terms of what we want to do and how we might do it.
So I can say for myself that yes, as the manager, yes, I'm still interested in having that conversation. And so I guess it's kind of up to the rest of the board on how the board feels about that. But certainly I know we talked about that and we talk about how we'd like to approach that and how we want to do some of that joint learning, I think, around that topic. So yeah, let's put that on. Yeah, I think that might have been one thing we thought about was a retreat. Was another retreat topic, but.
What's the board's pleasure? Is that a topic you want to learn more about? And if so, how do you want to learn it? Field trip.
Field trip?
Yeah, field trips are good. Actually, the BLM is doing some really interesting on-the-ground practice that is both on the ground, but also in journal articles and things they've written about it. So learning from them, they're both nearby, somewhat similar ecosystem and at scale. So we're fortunate to have them nearby and down this road ahead of us.
Where are they doing that?
Do you have any sense of where it is? I think it's over between Roseburg and Ashland kind of area.
Yeah, I think there's actually quite a bit. Out of the Roseburg office, I think they do some. And then down towards, kind of the Rogue Siskiyou area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a chapter from a recent book written by the lead guy on it. And we could share that around if you wanted to see it. I'm a big fan of how do we go from kind of the theoretical arm waving to like, what does this really look like on the ground? And how does it pencil out? And like, where could we add value? For instance, they're not really yield tables. There's a whole lot of basic forestry science stuff that hasn't been done on ecological forestry that we're headed toward implementing it. So this would be a great opportunity where we could add to the large, not just to what we need to do, but what the world needs to know from what we're doing.
And kind of on that note, I've mentioned this to you, Peter, and I've probably mentioned it to somebody else too. I think about one of the things I used to like to do, and one of my other jobs was to, when I come across interesting articles, research articles, or things around topics that would be of interest of like the ecological silt closure stuff that we're talking about, and some of those things that start sharing some of those out with the board, and so we can kind of, and as with staff and board, so that way that kind of creates some shared learning and opportunity to then come around and have some discussion around if those trigger some questions to talk about things we're going to do here on the Elliott. So stay tuned for that. That's something now as I'm getting a little breathing space, being in almost 5 months here, some space to start thinking about some of these other things. So stay tuned for that. So.
And in that vein, there's a new book that I think just came out. It's called The Other Public Forests. That's a national view of how state lands are managed in different states. I haven't read it yet, but it seems like we could learn a lot from that.
So potentially a book club.
Yeah. Without a quorum.
Yeah.
No, it's just the book.
Like a Dropbox or something that, because then there's so many different topics to learn about where people can put in articles or primers or even topics of like different types of forestry or stuff on freelance or just board education.
I'll look to my the IT staff over there. Do we have it? As I'm used to, I'll just say, I'm used to coming from the Forest Service. We had that ability when we had box to have an external, some kind of external where people outside the agency could do that. So yeah, there's probably a way to do it, I think.
Or we either have a Dropbox or you guys just drive around and deliver all the stuff, right?
I figured there's a way to do that. So yeah, we should all figure that out.
I have a question about is the retreat actually anticipated to be a thing that we mostly asking for like the scheduling standpoint is for a lot of us really challenging. So
I'm not sure there's been a commitment to a retreat yet and DSL funding for that.
It'll be dependent, of course, we have a new director then.
Yeah, and that's probably where we are. As valued as it is, I think as much as we'd like it, I think we're lacking that commitment yet. Isn't that? Did I get that right?
Yeah, I guess I'm not quite in the position to commit to it. I think it is definitely of interest, but I don't think I'm at the spot without having a new director in place to get that figured out when we do that. But I know there's still interest on our end from staff part.
I think it would be a good idea. We just need to figure out details.
Is that not in the training portion of the budget? Is there not board development baked in? I was actually assuming that there was some board development and education baked into their budget. I think that's important. There's an opportunity to advocate for that. In order for the board to be effective, we have to understand the issues and.
That's a good point.
And I'll second that. I mean, I think it's important for the board to be clear. If that's something that we want and we're willing to commit to, then we should say that. At least so we're backing up staff when you make the ask. This is something that the board really does want and thinks is necessary.
It may be helpful just to get a Google poll going for October, even early November, staff availability, so we can put polls on our calendars, we'll figure out the rest. I think that will just be the hardest part, if you finally get money and get it partner, but it would be too late, I think.
Oh, that sounds good.
We can spend Thanksgiving together.
Who's going to say that's for their house? Don't answer over. That's all I had. Pass it back to you, Keith, for any last.
I have a couple of action items.
Please.
that came up. So Hannah took these down. One action item is a list of local contractors for procurement and Oregon buys initiation. For who on that we have the board. So if anyone's interested in taking the lead on that, maybe it can be a staff board effort. The second action item, ensure law enforcement contracted for 25-27 biennium makes contact with local landowners adjacent to Elliott that have concerns with activities they have witnessed on the forest. So I think that was the Forest family. That was their last name that came in. And then also an action item is establish the research committee. So I'll follow up next week to get a meeting on the calendar with those individuals.
Good. And I'd like Darren to reach out and maybe DSL does this, but I mean, I think it really ought to come from the forest and staff that we, I think it's important that we reach out to the public and all the means that we have available in terms of yesterday's meeting, in terms of the HCP, which people already know, in terms of the ITP decision, and in terms of what we've done today and begun in the management of the forest that we're now proceeding with. And I'd like us to memorialize that and let folk know. And that includes I was just talking, I'd like to see us a brief white paper of some sort, or even just a brief note to everyone in the legislative body that we're doing business, we're open for business, and we're beginning to conduct our business in that manner too. I mean, I know that there are concerns there, and somebody mentioned Senator Anderson and his concerns today, and so I think it's very appropriate that we do reach out and let them know that we're trying to fulfill our commitment. So I'd ask staff to do that, or I'd be glad to help draft something and get that out.
Well, it's been awfully quiet.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? What is the garment on the back of Emma's chair?
Emma, what did you bring in here?
What is that?
It is a flannel with the sleeves cut off. Emma asked me to bring so she could wear it out in the woods.
That was really kind of you.
Yeah.
You didn't have a hickory shirt with no sleeves?
Do have that. Bring it. But then she said she refused to put it on because she wanted to stay professional. And so I think that's probably a good call on her part.
Maybe later.
Maybe later. Yeah.
Yeah.
And another? Yeah.
Thanks,
Brad.
Yeah.
Actually, would you mind if Brett has any last comments? This will be his last board meeting. So if there's any last comments you would like to make.
Last words? Yeah, eulogy.
Final words, write my own eulogy.
Right, it's 12:59.
Oh, thanks for saying that. Emma has run an orderly meeting. Darren and Keith have flowed and kept the order of the meeting. You guys it's just been a really, really fun experience all along. I think we reflected on some of that last night at dinner, but also just to think about it's not done yet and there's a ton to go. The work that you all did together today was part of that. And it's like, it's obviously not an easy thing to just slide right into. There's the techniques for consensus decision making, how to get comfortable with a process for budgeting and research now versus what will be. So it was cool for me to see just the Darren, Keith leading into the next steps and then the full board galvanizing around like a landing spot where you can be comfortable with the next big thing on the Elliott, which is getting to this previously far away place of reactivating management on the forest and actually doing research. And it's just really cool to see it be here with a really great team of staff behind it. And yeah, it's just something that I hope everybody can be proud of because I know I am. Thank you all for doing this. Not just like, here's something the agency is doing, here's something the board's doing, but like coming together around doing this together. It's cool to see.
And Brett, we would not have gotten here without all your hard work and support along the way. Honestly, you did a great job. And at first when you came on, I was like, uh-oh, who's this guy? And then I'm like, he's an absolute home run. And he's gotten us through here and a lot of hard work, and a lot of extra hours getting us all the way through this process. And here we are. We got an HCP, we got a force that's about ready to be active. So thank you.
And I want to take another, hopefully I'll have another public opportunity to do this for Brett too, that I really want to express my thanks to Brett too, is coming in new to this as being the new manager, the first manager, the new manager here, and being here all of 5 months, but recognize all the work that's went on before, the years of work that several others of you in this room that have done to get to this spot, so I can come in here and pick up and build upon all the work that you guys have done before me. So I just want to appreciate that.
Thanks, Darren. It's not easy to be put in a position where you're implementing something you didn't create. So I really appreciate what you're doing and the skill and the grace. Thank you.
I think one thing should be added is not only have you worked very hard, but you've worked super artfully, and you and I have connected for decades. And I think you brought a lot of lessons you've learned in many other places where you've helped people wrestle with gnarly people land questions, so that you make it look kind of easy. But I know that you built on a long career of thinking through these things, and we've benefited from all the work you've done with so many other projects too. So I hope you feel super good about it, as you should.
Thanks, Pete. Yeah, it's been really cool to get to know a lot of you who are working on the big issue of how do human communities and natural communities connect and grow in positive ways together. It's cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Brett.
I'll miss you.
Beers on Brett at the tavern. And last words to anybody who'd like to take advantage of them. If not, I'm going to bang my pen and call the meeting over.
We need to get you a gavel.
I'd reach back and hit Mike in the head or something. So. We're adjourned.